Reconvening the meeting. As I indicated earlier, we are going to conduct an interview. We have Bill Casella on the telephone. We interviewed him Friday, and due to time constraints and travel, we were able to set this interview up at this time frame instead of later in the afternoon because he wasn't available. So with that, thank you, Mr. Casella, for joining us this morning and your interest in this position. And I'm going to ask the generic why you are interested. We'll get your feedback, and then I'll invite the board to ask any additional questions. So with that, Mr. Casella.
Thank you, Donna. Good morning to everybody there. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I had a prior travel commitment. So I'm smiling in front of you as if I was sitting in the chair and you're all looking at me. Just imagine that. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bill Casella. I'm Deputy City Attorney in Los Angeles. I have been a public lawyer my whole life as part of my really a personal commitment to public service, and what drew me to my tenure on the State Board of Optometry from 2012 to 2016, and really continues to drive a lot of my activities today. I started out as a law clerk in the White House Counsel's Office. From there, I was an attorney advisor to the U.S. Department of Commerce in Washington, D.C. Went back to L.A., became a prosecutor in the City Attorney's Office. I still work at the City Attorney's Office. I currently advise our Department of Water and Power on renewable energy issues. My position is pretty straightforward. So, as you know, I was on the board when 684 was passed, and essentially the issue was the comment of the REOs in not the most transparent way. So I have some knowledge of the issues at hand. I would call myself an expert at this point, but I think I'm well suited to be a public member, as I indicated. As many of you know, since we serve contemporaneously, I was on the board for some time, and I didn't know anything about optometry or dispensing optician or contact lenses or anything other than going to my regular appointments before that. I was appointed and wanted to, embrace the consumer protection mission of the board. Funny options were presented to me. I like the idea of being in the Department of Consumer Affairs and the work that the Achilles Arts Boards do. The lawyers will appreciate that I wanted to be on a legislative and quasi-judicial body. Mm-hmm. And so that's what drew me to the board and really brought me to this position, not to do backwards, but really as a growth. And I see it as an exciting way to continue my public service in a way that without maybe trying to sound boastful, but I may be one of the better situated Californians to be a public member on the newly created committee, given my experience on the board. So I think this is really like maximizing the value of public service, because I think in terms of statewide stuff, this is probably where I'm actually needed most. And we get to say that, sort of say that often. And So we revisit an issue that came up during my tenure, and but from a different perspective, as a committee advising and making recommendations. In a way, they need to. I wasn't shy about not liking the way the legislature went about city board in not the most transparent way, and I think we can correct that for the people of the state. And I think I mentioned before that I have believe it was the medical board director who was at our meeting, where it seems like the RTOs, fault of their own, weren't getting the proper attention necessary in the medical board. So I think there's interesting challenges ahead as a government nerd. I'm interested in starting fresh as we take a fresh look at the regulatory structure for the RPOs and learning new industry. So that's why I applied and answering the call. And we have to take any questions.
All right, thank you. And with that, I will ask Dr. Wong, do you have any questions of the candidate?
I do not. But it's nice to talk to you. Nice to hear from you again, Mr. Casella.
Yes.
Ms. Brandwein?
No questions?
Ms. Garcia?
No, great to hear from you, and I look forward to more discussion.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
No questions.
Dr. McIntyre?
No questions.
Ms. Michelin?
No questions, but I have a comment. He was on the board, particularly on the Reg Committee with me, and while I think there's times where Bill and I did not agree on things, what I really truly appreciated was that he brought a perspective that stretched how I was approaching an issue, and I found his comments and his participation invaluable, and I think he would be an invaluable asset to this committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Moradami?
One question, two questions. One for the board. Mr. Casella is applying for the public position, so he is not in competition with the professional members. That's correct, right? Right. So, Mr. Casella, Mark Morgoni here. This is the question that I have. Clearly,
Mark, you turn your microphone up, or
Talk louder.
I can hear you.
I'll get closer to the microphone and I'll talk louder.
Okay.
Clearly, you're very qualified, and we have the history that worked with you. You know about the Board of Optometry. You're a very good attorney. This committee is starting from scratch. Board of Optometry is learning from scratch, and we want to get lots of input from consumers and the opticians. It'll be a learning process. How will you protect or I'm not using the right term, but make sure that you do not dominate the optician, the RDO committee, so that because of your wealth of expertise, your powers of advocacy, your good opinions, just your wealth of experience and knowledge, do not overwhelm or dominate the ideas or new ideas of the opticians or the public in this very new area.
Okay. So, as you know, there will also be a member of the Board of Optometry on the board as well. So, somebody would kind of even put a important critical role separate from being on the committee that actually will accept or reject those recommendations and have that weight. I'm not too concerned about good on me. I really don't know much about people who provide spectacle lenses. And so, you know, that was just as when I was on the board of optometry, out of necessity, one has to rely on the input of the other professional members. So I'm not too concerned. I no doubt will be opinionated on certain items, and on some I'll even talk with a loud voice because that's my nature. But in terms of working through the committee, I think you talked about important aspects of the fresh start, starting from the beginning, in terms of the input from the public and stakeholders and industry and all of that. That's going to be an important part of the process as much as any one member will be. And so when I spoke about the transparency, part of that is this open process where everybody participates and everybody can see what's going on. So hopefully it'll work out well.
Thank you. Ms. Maria Salazar, does Berber any
No
questions?
questions.
Dr. Turetsky?
No questions. Good to hear your voice, Bill.
All right.
Thanks today.
And I don't have questions like Rachel. I had an opportunity to serve with Bill on the board. I found him to be very thoughtful, looking at a greater perspective and always having the public at the forefront. So with those comments, I will open it up to the public to see if anyone has any questions or comments.
I have a question.
Yes.
How many pairs of glasses does he own?
How many pairs of glasses do you own?
I own 4 really good pair of prescription lenses, 2 really cool sunglasses, and 2 just for like driving and agriculture.
All right, that makes me happy.
And with that, show up.
And I believe they're all
With that, Bill, do you have any questions of us?
No, I'll be, if any questions come up or we need further discussion, I'd be happy to accommodate.
All right, well, thank you again.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing you all.
All right, bye. Looking at the clock and knowing that we also have other candidates, I would like to offer you the opportunity to conduct your interviews now as well, instead of at 1 o'clock if you like.
For just a public.
For the 2,
We have 2 special and contact dispenser candidates here. We are still, we have the other public member who's gonna, I told him after lunch because of given where he was in the agenda. So I do expect him to be here around 1.
Okay, but all the candidates for the licensee slot that are here.
For the spectacle lens and contact lens dispenser slot, not the RDO slot.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to make sure we're not losing out if anybody would be trying to deprive them of the opportunity to be heard.
okay. You may. Can you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Colleen Hannigan. ADOC and RDO, long time optician.
All right. And I will do the same with you and ask you the big generic question of why you're interested in this position.
It sounds like a perfect opportunity at this time in my career to move into a bigger scope of my dispensing optician experience. I bring with it experience in all phases of opticianry, from being a very self-starter, that's my first position, to managing very quickly, to running a very successful retail operation for a large chain, and then to running my own optical shop for 22 years, which I sold almost 5 years ago to a optometry couple, and they've taken it on to be successful. I write for our optical magazines. I like to speak at Vision Expo East and to teach. And I just thought when this opportunity came up, it sounded really well suited to my interests, to my experience, and a new opportunity to learn and to share all that I know. It sounded like a great way to serve in a much bigger way than I'm looking forward to this time around.
Thank you.
I have a question for legal counsel.
Yes.
I am acquainted with one of the candidate's former employers. I don't know you, and I'm not really friendly with that candidate, or with the former employer, but I do know where she worked at one point. I have no idea about anything else with that. Should I be recusing myself?
No, Dr. Trustee, would any of that information prevent you from giving a fair and objective, making a fair and objective decision for the candidate in their application?
Not at all.
Okay. I don't believe in this case a recusal is necessary.
Thank you.
All right, well, with that, we'll go down the board list again. Dr. Wong, do you have any questions of the candidate?
I do not.
Ms. Brandvine?
No, I do not.
Ms. Garcia?
Just in your experience, you work both with spectacles and also with the contact lenses?
Yes, I have.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
So the board is charged with consumer protection. Are there any specific things that you feel are an opportunity for California to address related to protecting consumers?
Well, I believe in proper training. I believe in licensing for opticians. And I have found with my experience in working with the public how much they appreciate that and rely on that. So I'm very much on board and want to be very much involved in making sure there is licensing and really proper training. I think that's imperative.
So as an attached question, a person can work in an optical setting without being licensed. What's your opinion on that?
I think that's perfectly fine if they are under someone's license who has the right licensing and right training. I think that's how I started. I think that's a great way to go. No problem.
Dr. McIntyre?
I have no questions at this time.
Ms. Mitchell?
One quick question. So, as we've discussed as a brand new committee, there's a lot of work to be done. We really don't know what the time commitment is. Do you have flexibility in your schedule to be able to make the time commitment to make sure that these meetings can happen so that we can really, we're kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of it's taken us a while to get to this point. So you're prepared for the time commitment it'll take
Yes.
initially,
Yes, I have no problem.
and the travel, if there's travel related and all that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Moradon?
2 questions. And it may be similar, one of the questions may be similar to Dr. Kawaguchi's, but what areas for optician is there most risk of consumer harm, or areas that we should be concerned about when it comes to consumer protections regarding opticians?
I think right off the top of my head, I'd say understanding the detrimental impact of not having proper sunglasses. And that dispensers not to provide that information and to encourage their clients and patients to have a pair of proper sunglasses, whether it's transition lenses. Although I don't consider those as primary sunglasses myself, I think the information that's available now to the public has encouraged a lot of my clients and patients to come in and be asking for things that the staff better know even more than the public does, because the public is a lot more informed. So I think it's imperative for the staff and the opticians to be way ahead of even the public to know what is needed and that everybody is offered the opportunity to have their eyes better protected from somewhere.
And the last question I have is, you included this in your application, but I don't have it in front of me. Can you tell us again about your experience in working in a kind of cooperative environment where you have various different stakeholders involved in a committee process, and then, recommendations are cobbled together and presented to another body for approval.
I love to tell the story of my upbringing, okay? And as I look at all the members here in front of me, it feels just like when I was at home having dinner. I was raised with 6 brothers and 5 sisters, and a very dominating, powerful, strong mother, and a very present father. And we were all together at dinner every night. So to have an upbringing like that, and a very good education to boot, taught me to deal with lots of different personalities, to be understanding to lesser members, and understanding and humble to other older members, and to learn how to have my own voice. And that still continues with my family. My family is very close. We're all very powerful people and supportive people, and I've been very lucky to take all that experience into my workplace. That's the best way I can describe how I work with others and how I'm a good team member.
Is that part 2? I think you had 2 questions. Did you ask both?
That's what question.
All right, Ms. Salazar-Herbert
No questions.
and Dr. Turetsky.
Now I gotta say something. Okay, so the world of optical, optometry, ophthalmology, everything's changing, and probably in the next 5 to 10 years, it won't look at all like it looks right now. What do you see from an optician standpoint, from a consumer protection standpoint, are the benefits and the risks of things such as purchasing eyeglasses online and online refractions? And opticians doing refractions in their offices via auto refraction apps.
I think you can't deny the incredible impact that being online and the services and the availability of the consumer today, what they want and how they want it, that has to be addressed, and we all have to get up to date with that. So to be ahead of that and to find out exactly what does the public want, the younger generation come up, what do they need in eyewear, what will they will tell us how it is to be. They will show us what they want, and we have to accommodate that. I'm open to anything that improves the public's access to proper eye care. And that's a big umbrella, and there's lots of things that can be done, I think, to make that happen. And I think not to be fearful of change is good, but to also have proper licensing and supervision and board to control that. So I'm not afraid. I'm very excited, but I know that there'll be, especially after being here today and listening to the laws that are up, in front of us here and how well it's regulated. This has really been a very interesting experience for me, and confidence knowing that there are people that are on boards and overseeing that type of thing. So to me, that just makes everything possible that it's coming, because it is coming.
All right. And then I have a question. From your perspective in your field, what are the top 3 issues?
In my field as an optician, probably the most important thing that I'm experiencing with the places that I still work is competing with online business. And I have just found that just encourages opticians to be better who they are. I don't find it's a threat. I think it encourages you to be at your top game and to be better educated and to offer the best services. So definitely online, how business and how frame buying and how lens buying affects the brick and mortar. I think also there needs to be a more immediate and an easier way to help those that are less fortunate to get eye exams and eyeglasses. I see some of that, some of the standard outreach kind of things, eye foundations that help people that are less fortunate to get eye exams. But I think there should be more immediate, easy access to that. It seems to me we're still kind of looking at who does that and where can people get help. And it just seems to me that would be a really important part of any dispensary, OD or optical, that would be very much connected to helping community that are less fortunate to see better. It's It's kind of like under the radar to me. Third point, I think there needs to be, I feel there needs to be an easier relationship between independent opticians, like I've always been mostly, and optometrists working together with prescription access. I'm sure I speak for a lot of opticians how difficult it is sometimes to get a hold of a prescription from an OD's office. Sometimes it's easy, and sometimes it's a struggle, and it would be nice to see a little bit more easy working together for the patient's benefit to have the prescription transferred.
Any comments or questions from the public? Do you have any questions of us?
How soon will the committee actually begin?
So the board is going to make a determination after they interview the candidates now. There is still an REO vacancy that we are looking for and recruiting for. But if the board so chooses, they can make appointments today for the candidates that they've chosen. We're hoping then that we'll have 4 members and can begin work while we're still recruiting for the REO member. And I hope that we can start as early as next month, as soon as we have the committees have the initial meeting to kind of outline what it is we're going to be addressing, what's the priority of the committee, and go from there. So I'm hoping May.
We do have a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
All right. And we have another candidate in the audience. Please come up. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Anna. Anna Watts. And I am currently working at Brandon Valley Eye Care in
I'm sorry, can you
San
speak up just a little bit?
Oh, sorry. And my head is sore. So loud.
You have to speak up because we have our webcast, and so it has to just pick you up too. So. Yeah.
My name is Anna Watts. I work at Brandon Valley Eye Care as a manager and business optician. And did you want me to tell a little bit more about myself?
Please, because my big question is the why, as you know. So go ahead.
I've been in optometry for about 10 years, and I started out in the retail setting at Walmart Vision Center. I started from ground up. So I was a sales associate all the way up to where I am now. So I know the pains and struggles of having to do the simple tasks all the way to now the management skills, and I'm in the process of slowly building the practice right now. And the reason why I wanted to be a part of the committee is because I have so much love and passion for what I do. And I think it's something that has always stuck by me for a very long time, but I didn't actually know I liked optometry until I went to school. And that's when I was going to UC Davis, and I was pre-med. I was double majoring at the time, and then I chose to, this is too much, I'm crazy, I want to major and minor. And during that time, I was still on track to do pre-med and trying to find my niche without realizing that there's so much in optometry that I didn't know about. Because I only knew the retail aspect of it, I never understood the medical side, and so therefore I never knew what my passion really was. And it wasn't until my regional manager at Walmart Vision Center, his name is Jeremy Smith, he was the person who said, Anna, you're helping to train everyone, why don't you want to become certified? And I didn't even know about certification, so it's that lack of knowledge on my part. I knew products, I knew the benefits of those products, but I didn't understand it to the full extent. So I think I found more of my passion as I was studying for the examination and becoming licensed. And it was there that I realized that, wow, I can do so much more. And as I became a manager, growing within the retail side over to private optometry, I noticed that they're so different. And there is so much more than what so many of those in the public even know about. Because before, when I was working in retail optometry, I thought there was just, okay, these are the lens, let's troubleshoot, this is the basics. And then now going over to the medical side, there's so much more, and I'm still learning every single day. And being a part of the committee means that I can bring my experiences, and I deal with patients every single day, so I know what their concerns are. And I think that's why I'm here, is because I want to be surrounded by those who are within the profession to continue to help me grow so I can make the best decisions for the public.
Thank you. All right, we'll go down the list. Dr. Wong, any questions of the candidate?
No.
Ms. Brandwein?
No questions.
Ms. Garcia?
Yeah, I have a question. What do you think about mobility for opticians just within the state? When it comes to licensing, you've experienced that an optician who is not licensed wants to move into a licensing. What do you think about that? Or an optician who's in California and wants to move to New York, that mobility. What do you think about that? Because there are issues that do happen.
No, definitely, and I hear that a lot, because if you go from one state to another, then you have to get relicensed. And I believe that as long as you have the foundation of the certification, if you can I believe I know are they requiring that we retest every time we go into another state as well. I believe that I can see the positives and I can see the cons of it all, because if you've been doing it for such a long time, especially as I get older, I notice I'm not a strong test taker anymore. But it doesn't mean that I don't understand optics and I don't have value there. So I can understand that aspect, but I can also see the other side of it where we want to retest them just to make sure that the standards are in place. I'm quite neutral when it comes to that, and that's where I like to kind of see both sides of things.
And then I have one other question. So what do you think the effects will be? Because there is going to be a degree program opening up this year for opticians for 2 years at Moore Park Community College. How do you see that as an influence for our state?
I think that's wonderful, because it was something that I cared so much about, and training so many people with no experience to becoming licensed, to becoming managers. I think there's such a need for that, and it gives people that opportunity to always want to grow and become something more. And I think that's advantageous for private doctors or even retail locations, because you have an individual who wants to continue to grow, and they're not going to remain stagnant. And I think that's so important, because getting those licenses means that they're always going to have to take those continuing educations. There's always something to learn. And so I think it's great.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
I was noticing on your application that in the last year and a half, you've gone through one was a promotion, but 2 other job changes. Can you explain your job changes and why?
Sure. So when I had left Walmart Vision Center, I had been with them for so many years, I think almost 9 years. And at that point, I wasn't growing anymore, and I was waiting for an area manager position to open, but it was just not happening. And so therefore, I hit a point in my life where I noticed I'm starting to lose my passion. And then I had to look at myself and go, okay, this is an issue, so what do I need to do? I need to switch things up. I was actually recruited by renters at Macy's, and originally when I had been recruited, it was with a particular person who I believed that I would love to have as my mentor. And unfortunately, that person was no longer there, so therefore things changed completely. Everything kind of went awry, and the office had ventilations that weren't even working properly. Our doctors couldn't perform their examinations the way that I felt like I was moving backwards. And so at the time, I was still doing my job, and I still wanted to learn as much as I possibly could. However, it still didn't feel quite right in my group. And I was actually reached out by Dr. Chow from the Family Eye Care, who mentioned he really needed help. And it was something that I wanted to do for such a long time because I wanted to really grow a private office because I love helping my doctors in any way that I can. And I felt like it was the right move for me, which I have no regrets about because just the fact that I've hired 7 people since October and trained them to where they're at right now, I'm extremely proud. And so that is the reason for the career changes.
Okay, thank you. As a follow-up question, you seem like you are aggressively pursuing new opportunities, new ability to learn things. So with this position, you'll be representing a wide range of people. Your main background has been in Walmart, which is a retail base, and so your new position is with private. But how would you expect to be sure that you're representative of everything that the board may be encompassing and needing to address? How would you approach that?
Well, for me, I believe that I only know such, to me, it's still a very small part of optometry. And since my first meeting with the board, I think it opened so many doors for me in terms of, wow, I didn't know there was this side and this side, and the DCA, it was so exciting for me. And for me, I think that because there's so much for me to learn, I can always learn more, and I can always differentiate between the pros and the cons. But I think the ultimate thing is being able to see what's in the best interest of the public, and that's all I've ever cared about. So regardless if I'm in retail optometry or private optometry, the patient's still the same. That doesn't change. And I think that's my main focus, regardless of where I am.
Dr. McIntyre?
No questions.
Ms. Michelin?
Just a quick question. So, as we mentioned, this is a new committee. I think you've heard there's a lot of, we're pulling this together. We're doing a lot of outreach to RDOs with the Breeze project and all that. Are you comfortable promoting, part of the job as a committee member is also promoting the changes, making sure RDOs understand the changes to the law, that they understand it applies through Breeze and all that. What would your approach be to get the word out? Because California is a big state. What are some of the ideas you have in terms of raising the profile of this committee so that RDOs feel like they're part of our team and welcomed within our board of optometry?
So I believe the world of optometry is very small, and you start with your neighbors. So reaching out to whether it's the vendors that you work with on a daily basis, to the offices that are next door to you, all the way to, I still have very close connections with the retailers. So that means I just need to go and talk to more people because this is important, and I believe that with the use of technology nowadays, we can always create marketing, advertisements, flyers, something, maybe during the expos. That's a huge way to promote the importance of human licensing.
And you have the time to be able to commit to this committee?
Mr. Moradani?
The same 2 questions I asked earlier, Ken. The first question is, what is the primary area of consumer risk when it comes to options? That's the first question.
Improper dismissal. I feel that when an optician does not understand the importance of adjusting the eyewear on a patient, for example, a progressive lens wear, if we don't make sure that that patient is fitted properly, meaning that the sight height is sitting on that patient's face correctly, and actually walking them through how to use that progressive lens, that's a failure on the optician's part. Because a lot of patients who come back for RX checks, it's due to the fact that they weren't trained properly. And if a patient doesn't know that they shouldn't look down while they're walking and they trip and fall, that's our fault. And so therefore, if there's a lack of training there, then I think that's the biggest risk. Because imagine if they get into a car and they start driving and they get into an accident because they're looking in the wrong range. I think that's a huge risk.
And then my second question was, what are some experiences or examples where you worked in a cooperative environment with different views and a board or other authority kind of overseeing recommendations that you make?
I feel like this is every day of my life where you're going to always have those who disagree with you. That's fine. I think that's the beauty of everything, is that you learn from one another, is take the good with the bad and then choose. You can always have your own opinions, but never demean another person for theirs. I think that's important. And it helps you to see the perspective. Because I mean, my husband and I are great examples. We are completely opposite in so many ways. However, I can understand his viewpoint because that's how he feels, that's his perception. And therefore, you never want to make them feel as though that perception isn't their reality.
Thank you. Ms. Salazar-Sperber?
No questions.
Dr. Turetsky?
You've worked in a couple of very large retail settings, so in Walmart. Ms. Garcia just brought up the issue of licensing for having a 2-year program and getting an optical license, an optician's license. If something like that was to actually occur and it was mandated that folks who are going to be working with the public dispensing glasses, contact lenses, et cetera, have a formal education in licensing, it could potentially negatively impact the corporations that you're working for, because it's going to cost them a lot more money than getting unlicensed people to work under somebody's license. If you're one of the folks that's going to be dealt with giving opinions on that, how would that affect you when it's going to be in conflict with the very organization that you're working for versus the potential public benefits of having licensure for everybody?
I believe when it started rolling out at Walmart Vision Center, they required someone has to be there at all times to have a license.
So that's the law.
Yes. And when I went over to another place, it was very different there. And so I was very used to the fact that we were encouraged to get our proper training so that way we can get our license. And I believe that the public is what's important, because if I was the patient, and I always put myself in the patient's shoes, if the person who's dispensing to me doesn't know what they're doing, I think that's a huge issue. And I've never had an issue with any of my staff members with the fact that I tell them you need more training and let's get you the proper training. They actually welcome it because they love the fact that we're investing that in them and that we're helping them to grow, because we want them to be their very best and to do their very best for the patients that are in front of them. Whether it negatively affects the retail or not, I think what matters is the public. And that means that we're going to have to step up in that setting so that we can get those people properly trained and licensed.
Would you feel comfortable advocating that to your regional manager or somebody higher up within a large corporate setting?
If it's the law, then it's the law. Then yes.
But if you're going to be somebody that might have an influence on that law,
If I'm someone that has an influence on that law, then if it creates a bias there, then I have to step out. But if I'm able to see both perspectives and make a meaningful decision that's best for the public, then I think that it's still very much valid.
All right. And then I have the question of the top 3 issues in your field?
Number one is improper dispensing. Number two would be poor troubleshooting. And that's number two. Number three, the last would be a lack of training.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from the public? And what questions, if any, do you have of us?
Well, I believe Colleen already asked the first question. I think the second would be, what is the end goal timeline-wise? And how many people are we looking? Are we all working together as a team to come to one decision? Or are we breaking it up with the licensed opticians?
So, timeline, the committee itself is going to be ongoing, but in the statute, the board is tasked with those initial appointments to stagger the appointment. So that's up to the board to decide how long each initial appointment is going to last. As far as the committee goes, there will be 5 members of the committee who come and meet, and it'll be up to them if they want to break up sections and assign 2 members to work on different sections. So that's going to be on the committee. The committee is going to be very collaborative and work together to decide the best way to address all the issues facing the profession and the board and consumers. With that, every recommendation or decision that the committee makes would then go to the board for them to decide and what the best way to go. They can accept the recommendations or they can amend recommendations going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
On behalf of the board, I want to thank all of the candidates for joining us this afternoon and for having interest in these positions. So you will be hearing from us very, very soon. Thank you. All right, going back to the agenda, we were talking about legislation, and we were at SB 572. I believe we've concluded the discussion on that. We still have 641, and I don't think we're going to have enough time for 11:10 yet because we're going to break at noon and walk over for lunch. But let's move. Okay, good.
Well, we might, because I don't have much of an update with 641. As I mentioned in my material, 641, it was the concerns that we initially had. It since then has been basically gutted, and there's very minimal to that. So I don't have any concerns right now. Again, it's in its infancy stage, so I didn't anticipate a lot of conversation with this, but I'm open to entertaining questions going forward. But I didn't have any additional updates to this one.
Rachel, do you think you would have enough time? 15 minutes, is that enough, or?
Yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and go for it then.
We'll push through.
AB 1110.
Okay, so children's vision. So first of all, we had our first hearing on April 6th. I think Jessica touched a little bit about it. Hopefully, I know some of you might have watched it on the internet. We did the press conference ahead of time. I know Jessica sent out a great email summarizing all of the press that was received all over the state of California. I know that I personally shared some things on my Facebook. I received a lot of personal messages from folks thanking us for doing this. That, you know, the stories that I keep getting from folks who said I was never got a pair of glasses until I was 13, or I mean, it's actually becoming more and more heartbreaking when you realize how many older people fell through the cracks when they were children. I think the process of going through the committee hearing was kind of fun. I know Glenn got quite a workout going up and down the steps at the Capitol. It was a busy day there, but we were able to get the bill out. We had 1 no vote by Assemblyman Kevin Kiley, and then 1 abstention by Assembly Member Rocky Chavez. Otherwise, the other members of the committee passed the bill out. We did have our opposition. No surprise, Kaiser is leading the charge when it comes to the opposition. We are trying to see if we can work with them, but I am anticipating that's probably not going to happen. We're coming from very different perspectives on this legislation. The bill now moves to Assembly Appropriations Committee. It probably will not be heard until late May, right?
May 26th.
Oh, May 26th. So it's on suspense. So right now we are in the process of a couple of things. One is getting concrete data on the costs that eye exams, what the true cost is. What happened in SB 42 was there was this price tag put on it that, in my personal opinion, was probably a little unrealistic. It was probably a little bit high. And so one of the asks I have, particularly of those in the profession, is to help us and make sure that our numbers in terms of the cost of a comprehensive eye exam is correct. Because that's going to be one of the sticking points. The other sticking point will be Medi-Cal utilization. There's not much we can do there. We're going to have to work with the appropriations committee on analysis to get that number. But one thing I would ask of our colleagues is that when that analysis comes out, that all of you take a moment and look at it and give us feedback. Because especially those in the profession, if you see something that strikes you as we don't think that's correct, let us know that so that we can work with the committee and correct that information. I will say that the opposition just recently, yesterday?
Yeah.
Yesterday, has proposed some amendments. I would say they're not really amendments, they're more completely changing the framework and the intent of the legislation. They are not in print yet, but I think that we would like to put the board on notice that probably in the next week, you will be getting an email. We'll have to do a 48-hour meeting to have a discussion about it. My personal opinion is that given what the amendments are, if the author chooses, and again, one thing I want to reiterate is that at this point, while we're the sponsor, it's Autumn Burke's bill. So she can do whatever she would like. We can then decide whether or not we would like to continue to sponsor and support the legislation or not. And so given the intent of these amendments, that's a discussion we'd like to have with the full board. That's why we'll have to have, so I'm asking all of you now, I know we don't know when it will be, but when that email comes, we really need everyone to take, I don't honestly think it will take that long, because I think if they're the proposed amendments, it will be a very quick meeting. We did have great support, for those of you who did not watch the committee hearing, I highly recommend you do. It was fascinating, both on the legislative process, but I will say that as Glenn pointed out, I think the best part were these little kids getting up saying, "Me too," with their little glasses on, and if you could see the members of the committee, kids are always a great advocate for legislation. But what really was, I think, great about that day was it really showed the role of the State Board of Optometry and the passion that we have. Glenn and I going in, tag teaming, I was able to participate with my skill set at the beginning, doing the press conference, tagged it over to Glenn, who then took on the committee and gave great testimony before the Education Committee. And it was just, I think, an incredible I think all of you should be very proud of what staff was able to do and what the colleagues of the board were able to do in representing all of you. So I don't know if you have any comments.
First of all, I'd like to also thank the COA for
Oh,
the
yeah,
support. They've been a big advocate of ours as well. As we continue to move forward as well, Jessica, did you have an update for us on whether there could be a potential need for us to?
Yeah, so Assembly Member in Burke's office, I'm meeting with them, and COA is going to attend to on Monday. They have also expressed interest in calling a stakeholder meeting, so this would be held by Assembly Member Burke's office with the opposition, and they had invited the board to attend as well. Obviously, the full board wouldn't go, but perhaps the board would delegate one member to participate in the stakeholder meetings with me to keep the children vision work group apprised of it, and then in turn bring the information back to the board.
So we would seek a motion.
I think Kurt has
Yeah, just a couple of things. I think depends on really, again, politics and procedure here in the Capitol, not my forte. My only concern is that, if we call 48-hour meeting, members are aware, I think, of the urgency of that, because it sounds like that will be necessary. In the interim, the board may want to entertain a motion to delegate one of the members of the board to a visual shop to attend with Ms. Sleeperman as to whatever initial meeting is going to occur. And I think also that the current position of the bill of the board on this bill is still support pending whatever recent mandatory developments we have. Is that correct?
Yes, and I want to clarify too, that we might not need a 48-hour notice if a school member Burke's office does not accept the amendments. So I don't want to make it sound like this is definitely happening because I have not spoken with them on what their thoughts are on these amendments, if they're going to accept them. I don't know if someone from COA has spoken to them yet because we did just receive them. So it may be that they have kind of the same reaction that I did and that the members did. And not take them. But if they do, I do think that we should do the 48-hour notice.
All right, so I will entertain a motion that we authorize a member of the Vision Committee to attend this work group session.
Second.
Why didn't he?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, so motion made by Dr. Wong, second by, who's it?
I'm sorry, which one is it?
Sid.
Sid, okay, thank you.
Any discussion?
On the motion or on the?
On the motion.
The motion.
And public comment? All right, so all in favor, roll call vote? Almost got me that time. All right, Donna Burke, aye. Dr. Wong? Aye. Sid Brandwein? Aye. Ruby Garcia?
Aye.
Lynn Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Deborah McIntyre?
Aye.
Rachel Michelin?
Aye.
Mark Moritami?
Aye.
Maria Salazar Sperber?
Ms. Berber has recused herself and will not be participating in this vote.
Okay. And Dr. Turetsky?
And I have just one last comment. One thing to just make sure we're all on the same page. This bill is not a mandate. It is, we're not mandating it, we're not requiring it. There's been some confusion, particularly some members of the opposition have continued to stress that it's mandated, and it is not. We amended that out. And the other is, at this point, we are asking if any of you have groups that you can get to send in letters of support, different organizations, folks that would support this legislation. I think that's really important to get as many letters of support in as possible. And then also, your members of the legislature, if you have relationships with your elected officials, especially in the assembly, now would be a really good time to kind of start trying to reach out to them, letting them know the importance of the legislation, and really emphasizing that it is not a mandate. That is the kind of the number one message. It's not a mandate, because that's one of the biggest, I think, obstacles that we've been facing. And then also that it's important that vision, 80% of learning is visual. And there are kids that are falling, there are kids falling through the cracks, and that's why we're doing this legislation. Ruby or Glenn, anything else?
So the other thing I just want to mention to the board as a whole is when we look at our responsibilities as far as consumer protection, we were talking earlier about some different things around enforcement, and the perception really I think that exists within the eye care community is that's one of our core responsibilities. However, it's also our responsibility to be proactive and ensure that we're protecting the consumers too, and I think this is a good example of that. So thank you for your continued support as a board.
Yeah, I do like the direction it's going. It's going to help consumers understand the importance of eye exam, really bringing that out for their protection.
Sid?
Question regarding letters of support. Many organizations appreciate it when they are given a
We
template.
have one, don't we?
Could that be
From the board
forwarded
members?
electronically to us to then share with those? Okay.
Didn't I?
So, yeah, so the board at the last meeting approved a letter from the board members, but if we want, we can tailor that to the businesses as
That'd be
well.
great. Maybe just email it out to everybody.
Great. Thank you.
That was your questions on that one? Okay.
I want to compliment Glenn and Rachel for all the hard work and Ruby for all the hard work you did on this. We're very impressed by watching the hearing online. I was also impressed by the thoughtfulness of the legislators in looking at this, and they had well-considered questions and thinking. As a former poli-sci major, I was fascinated by this process, in that, you know, if you kind of peel away the veneer everyone talks about consumer protection and what's good for the kids, both sides, right? It was just fascinating to me to see this is an example of a turf battle. Like who gets the work, the school nurses or the optometrists? And that's causes poli-sci. The other kind of interesting was the position of the insurance companies, in that even though one's policy might say that an eye exam is covered, that the insurance companies appear to be opposing it because they don't want people utilizing a right that one has under one's policy, which is very sad to me.
I do applaud the committee and staff on the work. This is a perfect example of why we're at this stage. So congratulations. With that, we're going to break for lunch, and we'll be back in about an hour. And we're going to go out of order on the agenda. We do have another candidate who is here, so we're going to go ahead and take up agenda item 14. So, sir, if you'll just come up, introduce yourself.
Hello, board members. My name is Kanchan Mutu. I am a co-founder of the Hollywood Fringe Festival, which is a performing arts festival in Los Angeles.
All right,
I'm 41.
No, we're going to start with the big umbrella question, and can you share with us, please, why you're interested in this project?
I've had a passion for public service for a while now. I used to work for a state assembly member about a decade ago now. Assembly member with Levine out of the Valley, San Fernando Valley. And since then, I've gone and done a lot of volunteer work, and one of the things I wanted to get back to was working on the state level as well, volunteering on the state level. I've previously served as a city commissioner for the LA Convention Center, and that was interesting work, working both with the city and county, trying to make the LA Convention Center a diamond for Los Angeles.
And each of our board members will have an opportunity to ask you questions, and I will start with Dr. Wong.
I have no questions. I have no questions at this time.
Ms. Brandby?
No questions.
Ms. Garcia?
I'm just curious, in any sort of, have you ever just gone eye exams or really dealt with opticians?
I have gone for eye exam, but I do have 20/20, sorry. But my wife is legally blind in one eye, so, you know, I get both sides. I go for eye exams on probably should go more often, but every 2 years.
They don't want to hear that.
I know. But like I said, 20/20 vision, I figure at some point it'll start to go and then I'll go more. But yes, I used to, especially when I worked at the state, for the state, which had wonderful insurance, I would go on a yearly basis. But it's been a little while since I've had that insurance.
That's all. Dr. Kawaguchi?
There's going to be a lot of places that the committee will need to go that we haven't gone before. How are you with initiating change where there's not a clear path?
Well, I would say I enjoy those types of situations. Just going back to what I do most of my time, other than being a stay-at-home parent with my 2 kids, the Hollywood Fringe Festival was a festival that came out of nowhere. We built it out of nowhere. There's never been a theater festival in Los Angeles in the last 15 years. So we actually took 2 years to help develop relationships and bring different community members together and work on it 2 years before we even opened. So I like those kind of challenges. I like to go into new areas and try to figure out new ways of doing this.
Dr. McIntyre?
No questions.
Ms. Mitchell?
So how would you describe your leadership style? Are you a collaborative leader? Do you, I mean, how would, if I was sitting on a board with you, what would my impression be of your leadership style?
I think you would find me very welcoming of all voices, but at a certain point we would probably start to need to make decisions and move forward. I served as the president of the LA Convention Center board for 1 year, and we had many opposing views on that board from the city versus the county. But I like to let the board members discuss. But at a certain point, you do have to make a decision, and so then you come together and you try to come up with the best solution at that point and move forward with it.
Thank you.
Mr. Morris?
It's obvious from your application you have a lot of experience working with government, working with groups, and you're very smart and articulate. How do you ensure that, given your experience and skills, that you do not only dominate a committee of people who are not lawyers or who have not had that much experience working in kind of this regulatory environment, who come from different kind of backgrounds?
Well, I think it's a matter of allowing, as I mentioned, I think it's a matter of allowing people to have their voice heard. And I think it's giving them a chance as opposed to just dominating the conversation. I would, in my capacity as the commission president, I would allow conversations to go probably longer than they should have, just so everyone felt like their discussion points were being heard. And sometimes by extending that length, options came to the commission that had not been discussed, out of just allowing the brainstorming to happen. So I feel that if you allow people the chance to hear their voice, you will move forward in a much better collaborative way than if you just have one person moving forward, trying to move the agenda forward.
Ms. Salazar-Sperber?
No questions.
Dr. Turetsky?
No questions, thank you.
Do members of the public have any questions? What questions do you have for us?
Well, I was reading the assembly bill that the commission was built around, I guess. And I'm wondering, how will the board interact with the commission itself? I believe there's going to be one member of the board on the commission, and then will there be will the board of optometry be serving as the board of directors in a way, and then asking the commission to go forward to focus on one area? Once we've come up with the rules for dispensing opticians, what do you guys see for that commission in the long run?
So a couple things are set in statute of the responsibilities for the committee. So they have to do things such as review disciplinary guidelines, make recommendations on them, review the regulation structure. Those are set up by statute. At the same time, I think there's a lot of room for improvement for the committee. And the board would really be looking to the committee to work together to come up with potential solutions, look at all the issues that we have to identify and fix and come up with solutions while making sure all of the impacted stakeholders are together and they may not all agree on the best way, but the committee would then form recommendations to the full board and then it would be up to the board to implement. At the same time, even though in statute it says that the committee is in charge of reviewing the disciplinary guidelines, there are no disciplinary guidelines for the opticians. And so the committee would really be focusing first on that as well before they are in charge of reviewing something. So there's a lot of work up front that we're gonna have to do because the statutes haven't been touched since they have been created in many cases. And the regulations that would implement the statutes, there's very few to them and they're bare bones. And so there's a lot of work that we have to do to set up the committee and set up what the structure is going to look like. So I think that's what the committee is going to be focusing on the next couple of years and making all those recommendations back to the board.
Jessica, this is one member's answer to that question, and that is, I would see the committee as the go-to committee for optician matters, so that it is the first stop on policy issues regarding opticians, and we look to the committee as the experts, in a sense, and also the primary public input on a particular issue. That we want people to provide most of their public input to use, and make recommendations to us, and we spend less time on them.
Right.
On it.
Help you guys move it along.
Yeah, in the long run, in the short run, that Jessica described, you guys are setting the play.
Right. Great.
And I could just add that I hope that this committee also helps the RDOs and the opticians feel like they're part of what we're doing. That there's not a separation, there's not an us versus them kind of thing, that we're all together, all for the one purpose of consumer protection.
Right.
Any other comments from board members? Well, I want to thank you for taking the time and for having interest in this position.
Thank you. Thank you, Mitchell.
All right, this body is charged with appointing dispensing optician committee members. We need to nominate for the SLD, CLD positions and public members, and then we also have to appoint someone for the board. So, let's start with nominating for the 2-year position for the SLD, CLD.
Donna, before we start, can someone kind of review again, can you,
Yes.
how many positions we're appointing, and then, you know, I get the different terms, so I do all of that.
Want to take that?
Sure. So there's 5 positions. One position is an SLD, CLD position. That was recently changed because as you remember, the first version had 2 RDO positions. Through a trailer bill that was amended to include an SLD and a CLD, spectacle and dispenser, contact lens dispenser. So you have a spectacle and dispenser, contact lens dispenser vacancy. You have an RDO vacancy. However, we don't have any candidates being recommended at this time for RDOs. So the availability is you have the SLD, CLD vacancy today, and you have 2 public members for vacancy today, and you have a board member for vacancy today.
So the 2 women we heard from earlier are for the SLD, CLD position.
Correct.
Only one of them can be moved forward.
Correct. And so also the board has to determine the term. So at the last board meeting that the terms were discussed, it was prior to the RDO being switched to a CLD, SLD, but the board had agreed to do a 1-year or 2-year term for one of the professional members, a 2-year term for one of the public members, a 4-year term for a professional, a 4-year for a public, and then they didn't make a determination on the board member, so that the board would still have to determine what that term would be.
All right, I'm confused.
Okay. Sorry.
All right, so for the SLD, CLD position, what's the term?
So the board hasn't determined between the SLD and the RDO what the terms are, because at the time that this was discussed, they were both RDO positions. So they decided one of them is going to be a 2-year, one of them is going to be a 4-year. But since it's been changed, the board hasn't said, okay, we want the SLD, CLD to be a 2-year versus the 4-year.
So that's our choice.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, or you can, if you wanted to, you can change the term. The requirement in statute is just that you have to stagger the limit. But that was just the term that the board had agreed upon when we initially talked about it.
And then for the public, one's a 2-year, one's a 4-year?
Correct.
And my last question is, at the end of, someone has, let's say someone has a 2-year position, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have the power to appoint them.
No, that goes to the governor. So the board has authority to make all the initial appointments, and then the governor takes over from there.
By statute.
Correct.
Thank you.
Except whoever the board member is, correct? We appoint whoever the board liaison is.
I'd have to double check the statute, but I still think that it comes from the governor's office, the final appointment, but the board would make the recommendation.
Which board member?
I believe so.
All right, so now that we're all on the same page, let's first start with determining the term for the SLD-CLD. Do we want it to be a 2-year or a 4-year?
I would suggest, because we do not have anyone for the RDO, I don't know, and I'm gonna look to you, Ruby, I would lean more towards 4-year, since we're trying to get this off the ground. We have some consistency with that person being in that position, and then when we find someone for the RDO, they can fill out the 2-year term. That's just my suggestion.
But you always, the governor re-ups them.
Yeah, I think that was good, as far as, because there's gonna be a lot of topic that needs to be covered here. This has never really been discussed. The medical board has just been very quiet with the optician code changes.
That's just my suggestion.
Okay, we're all starting from the same
Yeah,
page, so.
people can
They're all
have a
the wrong
different,
answers here.
people can have a different opinion.
I'm official for that.
Okay, all right, so we're going to go with 4-year term for the SLD-CLD. We heard the candidates this morning. So I will entertain a motion to accept the term
So moved.
of the 4-year for the SLD-CLD. So I have a motion from Rachel,
Second.
second from Blaine. Any discussion? Comments from the public? Okay, all in favor? Oops, can't do this. All right. Donna Burke, aye. Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Sid Brandweiss? Aye. Ruby Garcia?
Aye.
Glenn Calabucci?
Aye.
Deborah McIntyre?
Aye.
Rachel Michelin?
Aye.
Mark Moradami?
Aye.
Maria Salazar Sperber?
Aye.
David Turetsky?
Aye.
So we are going for a 4-year term for the SLD-CLD. We had 2 candidates this morning. And I'm entertaining a motion to nominate one or both candidates.
You can't nominate both.
So, that's why we only have one spot.
I would nominate Annie. I don't have her.
Anna Watts.
I'm sorry?
Anna Watson.
Yeah.
I would second.
I just, I liked her passion for lifelong learning. I liked her passion for training folks and her experience in doing that. I think that she can bring that perspective to this committee. And I would just put her name in nomination.
If I can make a comment, opticians are very mobile. They really need a road of mobility, and hearing her, I really saw that aspiration she had, because that's going to be a plus for us to consider.
Any other comments?
I got one. Just by her experience in large corporate retail settings, those are the folks that are going to be really majorly impacted by the changes over the next few years. And I think it would be important for that group to have a voice, to get their impressions on how they're going to be serving their populations and how they can adapt to continue to serve their customers and still continue to operate in a changing retail environment. I just like her experience level in that type of setting.
Any comments? Yes, Mark.
I want to first compliment the staff and the committee that kind of distilled their candidates or recruiting candidates. I think both candidates are outstanding. It's very impressive by them, so great job. As I'm still undecided as to the 2 candidates. For me, the distinction was, first of all, your comments are really important. Thank you very much. I'm really benefited by very different insights of the board. Before I heard these comments, what distinguished 2 candidates for me was And I'm not gonna, I forget the name, but the first candidate, Colleen, was very thoughtful in terms of the expanse of issues that would affect her profession vis-a-vis the board. That was very impressive and very thoughtful. The second candidate, I thought, had strong experience in working with committees and boards and things like that in terms of what she described in her resume. For me, that's what distinguished the two. I want to hear people's thoughts. I haven't heard people's thoughts.
The second candidate,
okay.
And once again, I do like her scope. I like that she talked about continuing training and the things she talked about, Anna, they're right on focus to what opticians are facing. Can we safely take care of the consumer with just making the spectacles right, making sure that they're properly trained is what I really like, because that is basically where opticians is going in the future, because there is a lack of that all over. And then as we talk to each other, we see that some do have that strong focus and some don't. And I think she knows that. But again, I like her direction and mobility. The opticians are moving constantly. And they've got to be prepared wherever they're going to be practicing, because they're practicing. And it's not just a certificate or just a little bit of training. Wherever they're practicing, their wealth of knowledge is going to be there and available for the consumers.
Any other comments? Okay.
So I would agree with Mark on the diversity of the strengths of the two candidates. When I think about what we may need for the start of the committee, I believe that Colleen brought a richer background in diverse practice. So her background in practice was more diverse. She was an owner of an optical, she was an employee of an optometrist, she was an employee of a large corporation. So she's had a wide range of background. She looks at things in a very broad way. With Anna, I did like her personal perspective on learning. She, you can just tell that she is like a sponge. I'm just wondering what we need for the committee to get it really rolling. What's going to be the bigger advantage for us? And I'm not really decided at this point between the two candidates. I like them for different reasons.
Just a quick follow-up to what you just said. I really do look at it too from the perspective that there was a lot of, for lack of a better term, drama as this bill went through. There was a lot of pushback from a lot of different sides on when we finally got to this product. I just really want to make sure that the opticians and the RDOs and such feel welcome and part of the family. And I felt that Anna conveyed a little bit more of that than the Colleen did. That was just my impression. I think that, from a public perception type of thing, she would be someone who, especially starting out, I think it would be different if we were just reappointing down the road. But for this very first, when you have, I think, opticians and RDOs very interested in what this committee is going to do, that how these members are perceived and their welcomeness to new ideas and having people give personal input and all of that, I think is important. And that was just one of the things that struck me. I think on paper, they're both incredibly capable of doing the position, but I just got a little bit of a different feel from Anna.
I have one of it. I like both of them too, and I really respect what they both offer. There was a question that came up, because we are going to be dealing with licensing too. And I felt that Colleen had already made up her mind. Maybe you could be persuaded, but didn't feel that licensing would be required for opticians in different settings. So I'm a little bit concerned just about that.
Sid, you
We're on the initial screening committee.
Correct. That's why I've been holding back and not asking questions of them, because I grilled them to get us to this point. Two very distinctly different candidates, as you have noticed. I'm leaning towards Anna because she's a bridge, in my opinion. She's in that generation of being able to relate to those coming out of college or moving into profession, going forward into the new school system that's being created, those who are in the mid-level of their career, not senior looking down and back, and being a part of that movement forward where we need to go, has the passion and the drive. And it's a tough choice because they both are very qualified, and yet Colleen brings that seasoned maturity in the field to bear on a brand new committee. Two very different candidates I'm bringing before you.
Well, I thought both candidates interviewed very, very strong. And I go back to Dr. Kawaguchi's question, which is, what do we want?
Exactly.
I guess if I would say what I want as a board member is I want a group of people who are going to make sure that voices are heard, that people feel like their opinion is important and it's being considered, that they're not coming in with preconceived notions about how this committee should be formed or the direction it should go in, and that they're nimble enough to navigate wherever this goes, because we've never done it before. So it's hard to know because we just haven't done it. So I think that I'm looking at a mix of personalities that can help educate. And I go back to, you know, as a board, we learn from the other folks on the board. And I think that I would hope that we put together a committee where each of them can also learn from each other.
And if I can further say, I think as opticians, because I deal a lot with opticians, we're all in different thinking as to where we really want to go. Some of us feel we don't need more training, and some of us feel we do. And so I think this committee should be made up of people who are willing to bridge that, willing to bring in all that who are opticians.
So if we agree, based on the comments that were shared by Ms. McKay and Ms. Garcia, someone who's open, who's respected, who's nimble, and who can serve as a bridge, will those adjectives help you in deciding between the two candidates? And if so?
So I have, based on those comments, so one of the words you just used was respected, and so that's one of the big differences between the two candidates, is one of them hasn't probably had the time and exposures to have established that respect amongst the community in the field of opticianry. However, the other one had the background of teaching, attending national meetings, things like that. So, my lean is towards the experience. I typically have a foundational belief that broader experience will allow a person to be able to understand different opinions as they come up with the committee, yet still be able to express opposing opinions or confirming opinions to be able to move forward. Because there's so many unknowns, if we have somebody in a position who also doesn't know a lot, I just wonder, and it could work out fantastically, or it could also work for a disadvantage based on the makeup of the committee of having two public members that really won't have a background in opticianry.
And that could be complemented by who we appoint from the board, as well as the public members. So, because we're sitting on the fence,
Can I ask you a question of you, Donna?
Right.
You did a good job of presenting adjectives in column A. How about adjectives to help describe column B. If the other direction we're looking towards, so like season or something.
Before we go on, I think we're sort of conflating two things. I want you to have a motion on the second on whether you think you want to appoint this person. Now we seem to be like, what's the committee makeup? What are we looking for as far as the committee? And respectfully to the council, I would think that if you don't believe, you find out where you are with this one candidate, and find out if that's the candidate you want, and you take the vote, and then if there's that she does not give a sufficient number of affirmative votes, you can nominate the other one. I'm still a little concerned that as we try and construct the makeup of the whole committee, we have a motion and a second pending on whether you want to appoint this person to that position. It sounds like, candidly, it sounds like there may be some mixed emotions about that.
Pardon me?
Let's just vote.
All right. Okay, let's go ahead then. Any comments from the public? All right.
So the motion is
To appoint,
To appoint Anna Watts to the four-year term. To the four-year term
For
for the SLD, CLD.
She's the second candidate.
Yes. And we have Rachel who made that nomination and Marie who seconded.
All right. Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Dr. Brandine?
Dr. Brandon.
Ms. Brandine? Ms. Brandine?
His niece, the optometrist niece votes yes.
Ms. Garcia?
Yes.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
No.
Dr. McIntyre?
No.
Ms. Michelin?
yes.
Mr. Moradami?
Yes.
Ms. Salazar-Sperber?
No.
Dr. Turetsky?
Yes.
And Donna Burke? No.
Give me two on the phone.
Who voted no?
I have 4.
We have 5.
I have 5 yeses, 4 no's.
Second. There's your kind of us.
No, I think we have 6 yeses and 4 no's.
6 yes.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. So
You sure?
We can,
let's,
do you want to
let's
read
vote.
off the yeses?
Yes. Ms. Brownlee, yes. Ms. Garcia, Mr. Moradami, Dr. Turetsky, Dr. Long, and Ms. Michelin.
Okay. All right, so we have appointed Anna Watts to the SLD CLD 4-year term. Now we will move to public member, the 2-year term. Candidates are, right, we have 2 candidates.
I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, please.
If I could please, I'd like to nominate Bill Casella for the 4-year term.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to appoint Bill Casella to the 4-year term. Any discussion? Any public comment? Okay, we'll go for the vote. Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Ms. Brandwein?
Aye.
Ms. Garcia?
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre?
Aye.
Ms. Michelin?
Aye.
Mr. Moradami?
Aye.
Ms. Salazar-Sperber?
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky?
Aye.
Donna Burke? Okay, so we could appoint Bill to the 4-year term, and now we have the 2-year term. So I'll entertain a motion.
Motion for the 2-year term. I nominate, I'm going to pronounce it incorrectly, but Matu. Mr. Matu.
Okay,
I second.
okay, so we have a motion to appoint Mr. Matu to the 2-year public member position. Any discussion? Any public comment? Okay, we'll go for the vote. Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Ms. Brandby?
Aye.
Ms. Garcia?
Aye.
Dr. Calavucci?
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre?
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Moradami?
Aye.
Ms. Salazar Sperber?
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky?
Aye.
Donna Burke? Aye. So, we have appointed Mr. Madhu to the 2-year public member term.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, sir.
Right? And now we move to the board position, and we first need to determine the term.
We get to set the term out?
Yes.
But we don't know, we don't know, we can do any term, we can do a year
You can do any term, the governor would then appoint a vacancy, and after the governor does it, the terms are 4 years. Just
Oh.
the initial is the board sets the terms.
So then what happens if
Yeah, they got
their
rid
member, their term expires as a board member, but they're appointed to a longer term on the?
There, in my opinion, because of the pre-qualifications to be a board member, if you come off the board, you would come off that seat.
So if there's a vacancy, then does the governor fill that, or would?
Yes.
I would make it, I mean, if that's the case, then I'd just make it a 4-year term.
I second that.
I guess my question.
The motion is to appoint a 4-year term for the board member. It's been moved by Ms. Mitchell, seconded by Dr. Turetsky. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Okay, we'll go for the vote for a 4-year term for the board member. Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Ms. Brandby?
Aye.
Ms. Garcia?
Aye.
Dr. Calavucci?
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre?
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre, excuse me. Ms. Mitchell? I'm upgrading and downgrading him. Mr. Moradami?
Ms. Mayor across the board.
Ms. Salazar Sperber?
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky?
Aye.
And Donna Burke, aye. Okay, now we need to appoint the board member.
I nominate Ruby Garcia.
I second.
There's been a motion to nominate Ruby Garcia as the board member by Rachel Michelin, seconded by Dr. Turetsky. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Okay, we'll go for the vote. Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Ms. Brandby?
Aye.
Ms. Garcia?
Aye.
Dr. Calavucci?
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre?
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Moradami?
Aye.
Ms. Salazar Sperber?
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky?
Aye.
Donna Burke? Aye.
Congratulations.
You sure you want to do it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
This is so fun.
Perspective is, I would ask that the board direct the executive officer to write a thoughtful and thankful letter to the unsuccessful candidate, because it did take a little bit of courage to come up here, and we want to thank her for the interest for the position, even though she was not successful.
Yes, get that out.
Peace out.
Monday.
That's
Thank
it.
you, members.
You're welcome. Thank
So,
you.
I just have clarification, so how many members are, and do we still need someone else?
We need to party over.
That's it.
Do you have any candidates?
Not recommended.
Still working on it.
Your first job is to find, maybe you have to find her.
If I can comment, there is a quorum, and we join on that? Quorum. Yeah, so,
I will for argument.
yeah, so there is that perspective that is going to be represented on the committee. So I'm not sure the work of the committee needs to be delayed.
Plus they have a quorum.
Right.
Yeah.
And they are smart.
And they have quorum, so it's not like we're shutting anybody out.
Correct, and the appointments committee did recommend that the committee is appointed with the available candidates now, start working, and in the meantime, actively recruit for that remaining member. So we didn't want to hold up the process, we wanted to appoint, get a quorum, and start moving forward.
So the original selection committee is not disbanded yet because we still have one more position for new candidates for.
All right, let's move on to agenda item number 9, update, discussion, and possible action regarding merging the dispensing opticians fund and the optometry fund.
Okay, So the RDO fund, and discussing merging the two funds together in the 3 sections of the Business and Professionals Code was
Jessica, I want to interrupt you for a moment, because this item asks 2 questions. Merging the funds and merging the practice acts.
Correct.
Right, so those are 2 separate questions, I think.
Right. So the board had discussed it at their last teleconference, they discussed it briefly in a couple other teleconferences for the sunset issue. And the board was clear that we're not saying no, we're just saying we're not there yet. We don't have enough information from the fund condition of the RDO program to see if it is sustaining itself. While it is projected to sustain itself, we want actual data. The board had requested at least a full fiscal year's worth of data to help start that conversation. In regards to merging the practice acts, the board felt that there was still room for improvement essentially in both statutes on both sides, and we wanted to make sure that that was clarified and done, and rather than put the acts all together as one. So with that, we had the board had approved the response to the sunset issue, and I provided that in the material. The final response was. Ms. Bergen, Dr. Chawla did also testify during the sunset hearing for this section and discussed that we are taking a cautious role. Donna, would you like to add to that part of the sunset hearing?
I thought at the hearing they seemed to be very open to the idea that we needed time.
Donna, did they prescribe the time at all, or was it more?
No,
Maybe we come back?
they asked a specific question about would we consider it? And the response was yes, but we need time so that we can collect data and understand what's going on.
So, right, so the board had directed staff to do a little more research, to reach out to the assembly committee and find out what the urgency was in merging them now. They also directed us to reach out to the governor's office and find out where they stand on this, and reach out to the other boards who have recently experienced merges and find out from them any feedback, if they had pros or cons or something they would recommend us doing that didn't go well for them before. So we did that research. Go ahead.
Okay, one more question.
Okay. So we, and I provided the updates in the materials. Basically, the boards that we heard from was Cemetery Funeral and from the Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. They had recently merged their acts or funds, and it was at the request of them. They realized the efficiencies that could be had, and they had it as part of their sunset. When we reached out to the Assembly BNP, they said that it wasn't so much of an urgency, it has to happen now, but it will need to happen is essentially the message that I got. And I don't think that they're willing to wait until 2020 to do it, but they are open to having that discussion, to maybe postponing it into future years, but not at the 2020. And I think that was kind of in line with what the board had asked for, since we wanted at least a full fiscal year worth of data. So the staff was gonna go back to the chair and have that discussion, and as you all know, we now have a new chair, so I have to follow up with the committee and find out where we stand with that. I did have 2 conversations with the governor's office yesterday as well, and because one of the questions that was posed was, during the 684 conversations, was this ever discussed, and where they stood on it. And at the time, what they had told me is that it was discussed briefly about merging the funds and merging the acts, and I think they understood that with the uncertainty of where the fund was, they just decided that it wasn't the best time to do it. So they are looking into the issue further now, knowing that was an issue brought up at Sunset. So they're going to reach out to the Assembly and to the Sunset Committee and find a little more information and then follow up with us. So that's the updates that I have for now. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So I have an open mind on this question. I I start at the same place as the legislature, and that is, does it reduce administrative costs and is more efficient? I would like to know how merging the two funds will make it more efficient and reduce administrative costs for our board. No one has kind of laid that out for me yet. There's kind of an assumption from the legislative staff that it will be that's the case, but someone needs to show me, right? And the other factor in how I vote on ultimately on this is how this affects transparency, right? And I think maybe it was the DCA person at the last meeting said, well, you won't lose that much in transparency because if you look at the underlying documents and you match the funds up and you do this, you can figure it out. Well, you don't want to have to go to wall back to find out if the RDO fund is in deficit. So, and the information I need for the merging of the funds. In terms of merging the practice acts.
What can we do with him?
Sure.
Yes,
Sure.
So for the funds, and I can't say that in all certainty this is the case, but I know once the funds are merged and everybody is confident that the funds are sustaining themselves and everybody's paying what they need to pay to support the program, ideally we would stop having to track everything separately. We would stop having to, if I have Kelly help out the RDO program, I wouldn't have to have Kelly log how much time she spent to be able to correctly allocate that section and bill to the RDO program. That time tracking itself is incredibly time consuming. So once everybody is okay and confident that they are supporting themselves and that merge, it cuts down on administrative costs a lot. In a bigger picture for BCPs, for example, we have to submit separate BCPs because they're out of separate funds. We have different CalSTRS reports, fund conditions that we're doing, but it really comes down to the tracking the different levels. Even if we get for enforcement and any kind of thing where I want, it could be vice versa, where enforcement or licensing is having a backlog, and that RDO person might have a lull and could help and step in for maybe a few days and help with that tracking. Or if the RDO person goes on vacation and I want staff to help, so the program itself isn't hindered in any way, it makes it more difficult having everything separate to be able to track them separately. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for help.
But in the meantime, though, once we do get BCP approved for the RDO program to reimburse the board, even if with the funds were merged, I think what Taylor was trying to get at is you can still merge the funds and still have staff track things differently to make sure that it is separate. And the revenue codes would also be individualized. So we would still be able to go internally and find out how much revenue is being generated versus how much work is being done. At the same time, I would, in 2 years, I do recommend a fee audit of the entire board and all the licenses and registrations that we have, because it's never been done for the optometry side to my knowledge. And I think that there's been a lot of efficiencies that have been realized with a lot with Greens, and I think it's something that we just need to do. And so if we do that in 2 years, then we can look at every registration and every license type to see what the appropriate fees need to be, and we'll have that data to support it.
Okay,
So,
Ms. Mitchell?
So a couple things. So we talked about on the call that we wanted to do a 12-month analysis, which puts us at the end of, technically, let's just give or take, the end of this upcoming fiscal year. So as a board, could we say we're going to give ourselves a deadline? And I would recommend we also put a work group together who's really going to kind of monitor and see how this plays out, so that going into fiscal year 2018-19, we can have a recommendation on this. I think if we show that we have a plan, which I thought is what we had talked about on the board call, that this is what the board, and maybe we need to vote on it and have it reflected in the minutes. that would then show that, yes, we realize that at some point these funds are gonna have to be merged. And this is our plan, we have a strategy to get there. Give us that time, but they know that we're not just kicking the can down there. We're gonna give ourselves a hard deadline to make sure that we're gonna make a decision, up or down, we'll make a decision. So that way, I think that, it just seems to me some of that got lost in this whole thing.
No, we did discuss it, but the final outcome was you wanted it on the agenda to have a healthier discussion on it.
Because I think that the merging of the Practice Act is a different animal.
Right, and we're gonna take that separate.
But I think the fun thing was, my recollection, I think the more of the big discussion was on the merging of the Practice Act, not the funds. And I think we had a strategy, and I don't know why the 2020 thing got in here, because that's not what we had talked about.
We did talk about it, ultimately.
No, but I think that the motion and such was that it was a 12-month fiscal year type of thing.
That was that worst, at a minimum, 12-month. The ideal was the 2020.
Well, for some board members. So that's what I would say. I think you have to give a clear strategy, a clear deadline. It needs to be going into the 2018-19 fiscal year. I think we should have a work group appointed that is going to monitor this and make recommendations to the board. And then we need to set it on an agenda for whatever that board meeting is, that we're going to make a decision and a recommendation to the legislature. And that needs to be conveyed to the new chairperson of the BNP.
Any other comments on it?
One thing you might want to consider is, instead of creating an entirely separate work group, is perhaps, because these are statutory changes, refer it to the Ledge Committee, because they're making recommendations to change the statutes.
That's fine. That's good. I don't know that, if we're just monitoring it, we can do it through a committee as opposed to full board.
Work group for financial team, finance, overall.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Maybe a subset work stream specific to finance, looking at the overall health of it, to track this, to then continue it up through Reg. Because ultimately it may require some changes.
Because I agree with Jessica's point. I get it, that, if we merge it, then we can do a full analysis of the whole apple of where we're at. And I think that's a good idea. And to your point as well, I've had to work on different projects. We have different funds, and it's a pain to have to percentage out how much time you spend on this and billing it to this project and billing it to that project and keeping all of the documentation for it. So I see these savings in combining the fund. I just want to make sure that both of these funds, particularly the RDO fund, is going to be self-sustaining. And that's why we need the 12th fiscal year to see if the changes we've already implemented take effect. And then we have that broader discussion and the motion to merge the funds.
All right. So, any comments from the public?
Yeah, Karen Porches on behalf of COA. We did look at this, separately, both issues at hand, but related to the funds. We're okay with this as long as optometrists are not shouldering the weight if the RDO program was unsustainable, which according to the discussions, it's a sustainable program now. Plus I know we're relieved to have assurances from the board members that I've heard in different meetings that that's not your intention to raise optometrist fees to pay for RDOs. So we're okay. As long as those assurances are put in place, we're okay with the funds merging.
So from the feedback from the discussion we've had, I'll entertain a motion to create either a work group, defer it to the legislative committee, or a subcommittee of the legislative committee. Whatever your preference. Speak up.
I think it's fine to send it to the Ledge Committee. It makes sense to me not to create another work group. I trust that committee to make some good evaluations.
And then they'll recommend.
Yeah,
and that's fine.
All right. So, I will entertain a motion to create defer this to the legislative committee.
I'll second it.
with the recommendation coming to the full board to study the fiscal impacts.
So I think after the 12 months, that's when maybe they'll give the Reg Committee the 12 months to monitor this, and then at the end of the 12 months, bring it back to the full board.
So when do we want the 12-month?
To start.
So fiscal year.
So June, so
July 1.
July 1.
Well, I don't think we need to be that specific, because if they have information to share with the board earlier.
Right.
They'll bring it
Yeah,
in.
That's fine, yeah.
So,
Okay. So they are, the legislature is studying it, they will come up with a recommendation within some time of the fiscal year. And it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Any additional comments from the public? Okay, I'll go for the vote.
I'm sorry, so what's the deadline for the Reg Committee?
The fiscal year.
I think, yeah, I would say fiscal year 2018-19.
So sometime during that fiscal year, the
No, I think it has to be the end.
Anytime, but no later than July.
No later than, correct, no later than. The deadline is the end of this,
Or
I guess
June
17,
30th, 2018.
Yes.
yeah,
So like June 30th,
June 2018.
2018 is the deadline.
Yeah, that's the.
If there's enough
No
information
later than June 30th,
2018.
2018. Okay.
Because then when you tell the chair, it's a specific date.
And that way you have the flexibility if you find out in November,
Yeah, we can say that.
something that bring it forward.
So Maria made the motion, you seconded it?
That's
Sid,
Brandon.
Sorry.
I'm gonna call Sid Dr. Van right now.
Can you read it back so we make sure we captured this one accurate?
Sid made the motion, and then,
No, I made the
motion,
motion, Sid
Sid
seconded.
sorry.
That's okay.
And then read the motion.
And the motion is, yeah,
To, watch the separate funds for 12 months, and then, to sign it to the, and the Reg Committee will be in charge of that.
So you can come back and,
No later than
no later.
No later than that.
June 30, 2018.
okay, sounds good, got it. I'll do the roll call vote, we captured it accurately. Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Ms. Brandi, Ms. Garcia,
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi,
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre,
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Moradami,
Aye.
Ms. Salazar-Sperber,
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky, Dr. Burke, aye. Okay, now we'll go to the second phase, which is the Practice Act. A more healthy discussion.
I'll start with my
Yes,
session.
let's do it.
This one I'm even more kind of puzzled over. It just seems like moving paragraphs in the code that nobody would really see. I could see an argument for merging the practice acts if there are provisions in each that overlap, right? If there are two provisions applying to an optometrist or to an optician, but as I understand the laws, there's not that overlap. So merging the two doesn't really make any difference, and that there's no efficiencies or nothing really to be achieved by it.
It might actually make it more confusing.
Right. So then an optician will wonder, gee, does this apply to me, or does it
It's not, or look, it's in the act, so I can do it, so.
Well, just as an example, the BPELSG in here did, they combined their fiscal things, but they did not merge practice acts and believed it would prove to be very confusing for consumers if they did. We're already in a position where people don't understand the difference between opticians and optometrists. Now we're putting it all together, we just made it more confusing. We're distinct and separate professions, and I think we need to maintain that distinction.
And I'll add to that by reminding us about a comment Dr. Turetsky made earlier in our meeting about optometrists out there that can't even remember our current optometry policy. And so suddenly we merge those two acts, and now we have to test for combined acts. It's going to add that double layer of complication where it's going to be harder for both parties.
And was anyone, did the committee ask about merging the acts or just the fund?
So it wasn't For the ones that merged,
The Sunset Review Committee, did that, or
they,
did that come up towards the funds, or just the funds and after just the funds?
both.
They had asked specifically about the after.
Right, and I think that they saw it as we're in 3 separate parts of the BMP code. And so depending on who wants to go to what law, I think that there was some thought that that causes confusion because they're not all under one section. So I think they weren't going to make any substantive changes, it was just technical changes moving from the 2 sections under to the 3000s for the Business and Professions Code.
So you're saying everything then would be in this?
Everything is in that. So so the RDOs have already been in that book, and it's always been that way because we wanted the optometrists to also understand the laws as they relate to the dispenser. So that book itself wouldn't grow. It has been included, it's just in separate sections.
So what they're asking us to move it from the 3 separate sections to 1 section?
Yes.
I think that, in my opinion, I think that would make it more confusing. Because if you're an RDO, and you can go to your section, it would be easier to look things up. Having to flip through, looking between optometry and opticianary it would be frustrating to me if I have to kind of read through everything, trying to figure out what I need to know.
And I think for the committee standpoint, this is committee staff, another concern is that they don't want the perception that they are under separate entities, that it's the you versus me type of situation. They kind of what Rachel, what you were saying is that they want it clear that while they are separate professions, we're all under one board. So I think the goal was to put them all under one act. I think that was the goal.
Dr. Trask?
All right, so I'll disagree with what's been said so far. I like the idea of merging it. We now live in a world with 684 where optometrists and opticians are sharing office space in a way. And it would be a one-stop shop to go in and realize, okay, we're all covered under the same act, and I know exactly where to look to see what I can do and what the optometrist can do, what the optician can do. I don't know. I just see it as an easier thing. If I don't have this and I want to look up dispensing optician laws, it might take me to different spots. Whereas if I was just to look up optometry laws, if I went to that instead of optician laws, it's all in one spot. I just like the idea of merging it. As I said at the last meeting, we're married. We're going to merge our checking account and. Yeah, we've already decided we're going to merge our checking accounts at some point. We might as well merge the app.
I need some clarification. So by merging, it doesn't mean that we're held accountable as an optician compared to an optometrist, right?
Yeah, no substantive changes would be made. It's literally putting it in the same
One section for the exact same thing.
From a legal perspective, there is no substantive change. As a former medical board counsel, the prescriptions, spectacle lenses and contact prescriptions are in the 2540s. I think RDOs are 2550s. I think the SLEs and CLEs are in the 2560 series of the Business and Professions Code. They're all closely, the MPA, the Medical Practices Act, runs from 2000 to 2500. So the thought would be only that merging in the act is a little bit of a misnomer. What we're really talking about is just taking those provisions that are in the 2550s and putting it in the 3000s where the rest of optometry law is. That since we all have one parent now. So that merging the act sort of, I think, kind of takes more than it really is. It's not like all of a sudden, one license you can do everything. What it really is just bringing those relevant code sections to the 3000 sections.
Would it make it any more difficult or more?
Personally, as a lawyer, to make it easier, then that's my perspective, because you're not flipping through. You don't have to memorize, like, okay, is it 2560, 2540, 3000? Where is that?
So just here that an optician is supposed to post in their location that in this case, the medical board oversees dispensing opticians. You know, if it's gonna be the optometry board oversees dispensing opticians, and the optometry board, we have to have the same posting for optometrists, it just makes it easier, you're not looking for two different things.
I have a comment. When I search code section, I don't know code numbers. I search keywords. And I don't even really care about what code section it is necessarily. I care about what does the law say. And so I agree. I mean, this is just basically moving it, just the language part of it. And I actually do think it would make it easier for consumers, because consumers, if they're going to look something up, they're going to put in there buy something, and realize, oh, I've got it. Okay, what else can I use to lower my, and it's going to show it all in one section. So I think that it just makes it more streamlined than keeping it separate.
Well,
And the other, one more question, because let's be honest, everyone has code books just to look nice in their offices. People search the codes on the computer. They're not looking at, maybe you do, but I don't.
I love mine.
Yeah. But I mean, even the big, but I'm saying even the big, like the medical practice might be in a different code book, right?
Yeah.
So I think this just puts it all into one space.
So I guess my whole thing is this wouldn't confuse people as to what they could do, what they can't do. Just it's all listed in one section. But let's say the average optician or the average optometrist, if they were to go and look it up in the book, would they be confused what they are allowed to do?
Probably easier for them, because they're going to have one place to look as opposed to having to jump to different sections of the code.
Well, and it's non-substantive, right? I mean, that's the most important thing to me, is that we're not changing the Practice Act. We're not adding anything to the Practice Act. We're not, taking away. We're literally taking paragraphs and moving them over.
We're just changing the numbers, right? What chapter?
Correct. But with a caveat, because you're going to have some of the general B&P code, for example, 655, who references licensees or registrants who are under this section. So any corresponding changes would have to be made to make sure that when it's referring to chapter 5.5 for the RDOs, that change is made because we're changing the section.
Well,
so
what Dr. Dressy just read, that they're under the medical board.
That's actually that has been updated. That's an older version. But if you go on our website, it does show, it provides links.
I just did 3 Google searches complaining about contacts or glasses in California. And all 3 of those searches takes me to the State Board of Optometry.
I'll take it. Any comments from the public?
Yeah. Eric Birch again on behalf of COA. So most of our concerns have kind of already been addressed. First, when we first heard this was a possibility, our number one concern was, is it going to be substantive? Is it going to change our scope? The fact that it's not, addresses our concern. Our other concern was merging these, or combining, I should say, these two. If any requirements were going to be now placed on optometrists that were on opticians, or would combining the language somehow take away some of the state board's enforcement authority. But like we said before, it's not substantive, that addresses our concerns. Nonetheless, we will be watching this closely to make sure nothing gets transposed in the process.
And we just ask that you can keep that communication. If you do see something, let us know and we can work through it.
Absolutely.
All right, so I will,
Just going to say the same thing. On the other.
I'm right here, let's go.
Exactly. Catherine Austin's got a bunch of practice in eye exam. I think, much like COA, I think we're always concerned given that 684 is so new and still being implemented. Any word shift, minor comma change, our lawyers will argue probably would make a difference. So we would also be very mindful, thoughtful, and watchful of any minor change. Thank you.
All right. So, Mark. No. All right, what do you got?
Okay, we're talking about there not being any substantive changes, but what about perception of change to the consumer? how often does a consumer go in and want to look up regulations?
Well, there's an optometrist one.
Yeah. But now it's all kind of put
I
together.
would say that if I, as a consumer, have a question, my first place I'm going to go is the State Board of Optometry website. Very few people, it's sad to say, but I don't know how many people really even know where to go to look up state statute on the internet. They just don't. They're going to go to the board's website or whatever, and as long as I think it's clear on the board's website, that's going to be, and it's user-friendly, consumer-friendly on the board's website, I think that's going to answer all of the questions. The people who go to the code sections are attorneys or people who are trying to change code sections. Right.
Can I make a comment on that comment? So, my perspective from a consumer standpoint, because I get asked this question weekly usually, what's the difference between an ophthalmologist, an optometrist, and an optician? So most consumers have no clue what the difference of those three eye care providers is. So, again, it kind of goes back to my concern about merging things and making it potentially more difficult for a consumer to be able to access the specific information that they need if they do start to ask questions. So if they have an issue, for example, with me, well, is this according to law that you're able to do this? Yes, it is. Actually, then they can ask me, what's your position? I'm an optometrist. Then they could go look it up. Versus if we have it combined, we may muddy their understanding of that. That's just a risk point that I see based on their difficulties distinguishing the differences already. So,
That's your problem.
Yes.
Mark?
Okay, so I'll make 3 quick points. One is, if it's not substantive, and it's just questioning moving numbers around, why bother? And that's a rhetorical question. Why spend board resources, including staff resources? And your response to me might be, well, we're not going to extend the staff resources. No, because as the Professional Association just mentioned, even if you just change the number or move things around, their lawyers are going to look at it, our lawyers are going to look at it, we're going to have to discuss it just because of a number change, okay? My point 2 is then, Rachel touched on this, the consumers will look at our website as opposed to the code. So if there is kind of confusion or misunderstanding as to what laws apply to whom, why can't we have a fact sheet that says, if you are an optician, these laws apply to you. If you are an optometrist, these laws apply to you. If you are, I don't know what the other category might be, and have that on our website so that the consumer who does a Google search can, boom, find the laws rather than, and somebody said, only the lawyers look at the codes.
So this would be
Right, and it's easier for us to do a fact sheet than to work with the professional associations and the legislature
and the
lawyers to make a statutory change. And then the last point is, I know someone did use the marriage analogy. I know marriages where people have separate accounts, file their taxes separately for their various reasons. So,
All right. Okay, I'm going to let Jessica comment. I'm going to have Ms. Garcia comment, and then I'm going to call for the question.
So currently on our website, we don't have a fact sheet, but if you go to the laws and public laws part of our website, it does list for optometrists laws and regulations, and then underneath it lists all of them related to dispensing opticians. It has a link to their entire section for the statutes and their corresponding regulations, so they can go on right now and click to find out exactly what section would go to that profession.
And I don't need to open up discussion again, but there are opticians that work for ophthalmologists, and they are licensed. So they're going to be held accountable to what we're talking about here today.
Sorry about
Why did you?
Have you heard temporarily? Just on the confusion issue. So let's just take 2546.1. Subdivision A, on or after, now paraphrase, no person outside of California shall ship contact lenses to a California address unless that seller is registered with the Division of Licensing of the Medical Board of California. 2546.2. All references in the chapter shall be the State Board of Optometry. So there is at least some thought, from my lawyer's perspective, is maybe you want to harmonize the statute to reflect.
Word might be.
I just have a question. So, as part of this legislation, and I think I know the answer. Of course, we never thought to clean up the statute language, and that requires legislation, does it not?
Correct. And I think one of the things that's probably lost is a very good point, Mr. Michelle. I don't really think this is so much the merging of the acts. I think this is almost obsolete cleanup to suggest that, like 2546, unless the place is registered with the Board of Optometry.
So I have a suggestion then. Okay, let's Reg or maybe another committee, because I think that maybe before we continue down this road, we have a committee or whatever go through the acts and look at some of that language. And you're laughing because I know what a humongous task that probably is. Maybe Maria can.
Is Maria laughing?
The attorneys can do this. But I think maybe before we sit here and we talk about, quote, merging or changing the act, we need to go through and see where there are things that we need to change that, to your point, exactly what you guys brought.
And we'll have that as part of our strategic plan.
Yeah, so maybe can we postpone this
That's right,
until?
All right, let's move on. We're gonna take a 10-minute break. Be back here tomorrow. 7 minutes, like 2:30. And we have one final item or comment on agenda item.
So, there was a comment made about, regarding the discrepancies between statutes and doing the cleanup legislation. I think the comment was also the Reg committee to start with it. And instead, I'd like to make a motion that the board direct our legal counsel work with the AG's office as lawyers to work on, pointing out where the discrepancies, the hitches, the rough spots are. I don't think this is a legal task, not a policy task to go through the statutes and figure out what contradicts.
Actually, it wasn't going to Reg.
Okay.
It's part of our strategic plan,
Okay.
so we'll be bringing it back up then.
Okay, well,
Well, so I was just going to ask, is that a function of the AG's office or the leg council for the state legislature? Since I'm just asking, I don't know. Can you ask leg council, because it was part of legislation, wouldn't the legislative council, the legislature have a look at it?
That would fall within my purview.
Oh, okay. But it's in our strategic, so we'll wait until we go through that.
okay.
All right, agenda item 10, update on legislative proposals.
So this one, members, it doesn't have any updates so far as it hasn't been put into the sunset bill. We do anticipate them being included. They haven't expressed any kind of concerns or issues with the request. So I am confident it's going to be put into either the sunset bill or an omnibus bill. So I don't have any updates. I did want it on the agenda just in case we had updates to present, but we don't now. So that's all I had for this item.
Sounds good to me. Let's move on to agenda item 11. Oh, sorry. Any public comment? I read the bottom, but I'll. All right, agenda item 11.
So this one was the recommendations from the Practice and Education Committee members. The first recommendation is kind of something that the board has already seen before regarding some regulation changes. The board the committee had made recommendations to the board in the past, and at the time we had a previous legal counsel, and once it got to the board, we had just gotten Kurt, and he raised some concerns, so the board had directed the committee to take another look at it and work with legal counsel to draft appropriate language. So the language at the bottom is the language that's being proposed by the committee to move forward with regulations. So that was the first section of it. So if we want to take that.
Let's take it in sections, yes. Okay. You're part of that committee.
So, yeah, if the committee members want to add any part to it.
No, we don't have any.
No.
Any, comments, questions?
So, is this something that's in regulation for other healthcare providers in California?
Yes, several of the boards, several of the healthcare boards have statutory requirements that the licensing agency direct the seating is, and so this is consistent with those other boards as well.
And we do have a statute, 3059, that says that the board shall consider requiring this, but doesn't say that it can, so this takes that a step further.
Any other comments?
Another question, just a comment. We are all mandated reporters, all of us that are licensed, which is another thing that unfortunately a lot of ODs have no idea. Ms. Kimball, part of your presentation. With what we do in nursing homes, our doctors and our non-professional staff undergo at least some basic training in elder abuse. Folks just don't know what to look for, how to look for it, or what their responsibilities are. And they don't know that there's a 24-hour reporting time for certain things. They don't know they have to contact a state agency or a county agency or a police department. It's a complicated law, and if you don't follow the guidelines, you're in trouble. So I think something like this is really important, and it deserves to be considered as something valid of continuing education.
Questions, comments? Yes.
A question.
All right.
Does this apply to opticians?
No.
Why not?
So it's implementing the 3059, which is the Board of Optometry, the optometrists who are licensed. The this is putting into that regulation of implementing 3059. So it's purely optometrists. Also, opticians don't have the requirements for continuing education. So if that's something, I believe that's part of the strategic plan too, is to look at the continuing education requirements or even educational requirements period in order to become registered. So I think we have to look at that first before we do the continuing education portion of it. And I think a lot of that discussion has to start with the Disability Optician Committee and make sure that they're fully aware and they vet those issues and make those recommendations to the board.
In the future, when you have reports like this, I think it's important to know who apply to your optometrists or opticians.
Okay.
So I'm going to accept the recommendation from the Practice and Education Committee.
A second.
All right. I have a motion to accept the recommendation from Ms. Mitchell. There's a second from Mark.
Okay.
Mordomi.
Members, sorry for the rush, but if you want to proceed with rulemaking, it's kind of a different motion. You would accept this recommendation, and then you would direct the executive officer to prepare the notice, initial statement of reasons, and since we have a standard regulatory change, submit those documents to the department and to the agency for review. In the absence of any adverse comments from those two agencies, have the notice published for rulemaking.
I second it.
Second to direct the EO to do what we just said.
Make sure my motion sounds good.
Any other discussion with the board? Any public comment?
I just have a quick question. So the 2 hours of child abuse detection training, that would go towards their 50-hour biannual requirement?
Correct. All right, let's go for the vote here. Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Ms. Brandwein?
Aye.
Ms. Garcia?
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre?
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Moradami?
Aye.
Ms. Salazar Sperber? Aye. Dr. Turetsky?
Aye.
Burke, yes. All right, phase 2.
So the second part of this addresses some process changes. As you recall, members, in the past, we kind of revamped the entire process for continuing education approvals because it was lacking in the past and we wanted to improve on that. And so we went through the regulatory process and we changed some requirements in the regs and the corresponding application. And I think what we've seen is some of those changes have had some unintended consequences and starting to add more confusion and frustration for the providers because it's unclear what they need to submit and what's going to be denied. At the time, it was said the Practice and Education Committee wasn't going to view any of the packets until we made sure that every single thing was provided. And I think now the Practice and Education Committee has decided that they will see all applications, whether they're deficient or not, and determine if it meets the criteria set forth in the regulation, because that's what it really goes back to, is to make sure that this course is being requested for approval, it meets the criteria outlined in 1536G and is provided by the materials. And so to streamline it, so if they, for example, don't have a detailed course description, but you can tell enough from the presentation materials from the entire PowerPoint what is being covered, and they feel it still meets this criteria, the work group would like that to see those and be able to approve them even if it doesn't have A, B, C, and D. And so they also wanted to have some changes in the actual regulation and corresponding application, so I provided those changes. Mainly in 1536, they wanted to change schedule to agenda because that was providing some confusion for the providers. They also wanted to change, instead of topical outline, they wanted to include subject matter learning objectives. And one of the feedbacks that we've received from the providers is the people who are coming up and writing these topical outlines, they aren't the actual presenters, or they're not the optometrists or ophthalmologists getting these courses. They're staff people trying to come up with this outline, and they don't necessarily understand the full ins and outs of it. And so we've been asked to do, instead of the topical outlines, do just the learning objectives of it, and that gives the Practice and Education Committee feels that will be enough information to determine whether or not it meets the criteria. On top of that, because this is a new process, staff is going to create a survey to send out to all of the CE providers and get more input to see if there's something else out there that they feel we can improve on. And so that survey, we haven't drafted it, but we're going to be distributing that to all of the providers, especially the ones who have been impacted over the last year, and also to other continuing education course providers like COA and possibly ALA, and get other people involved and provide input so we can continuously improve the process that we've created. But with that, I'll turn it over to the committee members to see if
Nope, we did a very adequate job.
Will this be a moot point if we decided to move forward with code approval?
No. So code approvals, when you mean for the OE tracker conversation, code approvals?
They have.
So right now, all continuing education that is approved by COPE, that is pre-approved. So there's those courses don't go to the committee because they have blanket approval. So those two wouldn't overlap. But the stuff that we're looking into for OE tracker and what they would submit as proof for the continuing education, that also would not be impacted, because this is how the board is going to evaluate courses for approval on the board standpoint.
I move that we initiate the regulatory process as set forth by our legal counsel in the earlier motion.
Second. Right, so we have a motion from Mr. Moradami and a second by Ms. Mitchell to direct the EO to do what she's supposed to do.
And that process will prepare the necessary rulemaking documents, submit to the agency and the department in the absence of any adverse comments, and those documents published by the Office of Administrative Law.
Yeah, that's
Right to.
all right. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Okay, we'll go for the vote. Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Ms. Brandwein? Aye. Ms. Garcia?
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Ms. McIntyre?
Aye.
I did it again, Dr. McIntyre. Ms. Mitchell? Aye. Mr. Moradami?
Aye.
Ms. Salazar-Sperber?
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky?
Aye.
And Burke, aye. Okay, so we're on agenda item 12, our strategic plan. Okay. Well, now this was all the way back in January. We held our strategic plan. You've received the draft outline
Prepared by Solid.
prepared by Solid. And you have basically three options. We're going to either defer it, we're going to go forward with it, or because we don't have Dr. Chala's letter. As you know, her mother's been in the hospital all week. Her plan was to present her letter today. Obviously, she's been visiting her mom in the hospital. She hasn't had a chance to prepare that, so there is no message to insert at this point. What I'm asking is, do you want to go ahead without the message? Do you want to go forward with the message when she gets it, or do you want to defer?
Well, have you seen this? Is this the first time you've seen this? Or
Yeah, so part of the process immediately following the January strategic planning session is Solid then takes all of those comments they were typing up the objectives, the board provided input of how they'd like it worded and phrased and consolidated, and so that's what Solid did. They took all of the input from the board members, and this is their first draft of the strategic plan. So if you have any comments or edits, now is the time to provide it to them. And we could either get all those comments now and have the board approve it as amended, if they are okay with not having the message or getting the message in the future, or you could submit input to me in writing and we can bring it back to a future board meeting. That's really up to the board. This is just the first draft of what Solid has based off the strategic plan session.
There's a typo on the front. And then Dr. Wong missing her.
Oh, and thank you. And that reminds me too, Ruby also caught an error under the description of the dispensing optician appointments committee. What Solid did is they looked at our strategic plans, and that was the most recent information that the board had approved for the introduction of who we are and also the descriptions of the committees. And it looks like they just copied and pasted the wrong section under the description. And so I looked up what it would be under the dispensing optician committee development work group. That the board approved description was the board created a DOC appointments committee comprised of 2 members to vet potential candidates and make recommendations to the full board. The DOC will begin meeting in 2017. And so with that, the Solid team, yes, last night sent me a revised version just with that change because they recognized that was just a copy and paste error.
Okay.
nothing in here jumped out at me that I wanted to change, but I'd like to see the president's message before I give it public clearance.
Yes, I agree.
So with that numbers, if that is what the board would like, would you like to put this off until the August meeting, or would you want to have a quick teleconference review and do a vote?
Well, if we're okay with the document, can we approve the document pending Dr. Chala's letter?
Sure, you can do that.
Okay.
My only concern would be if there's, and this is the first time the members have seen this candidly and they've taught a few things, I would just be curious if they wouldn't want to take a moment and look at it and provide any written comments directly to Ms. Seifert, and then perhaps the board, you could determine whether if you think the changes are so minor, and then when you receive Dr. Chala's message, maybe bridging a teleconference, and we talked about a lot of teleconferences we talked a lot about today, or if there's substantive stuff, you may want to hold to the August meeting.
Okay. We're not under any strict timeline for this, correct? So I like where Kurt was going with it, of giving us time to send any, if we find typos or anything like that to you, make the changes, incorporate Dr. Chala's letter, we get one clean copy with all the changes in it, and then teleconference or just push it to the August board meeting. That way we don't have to incur extra travel costs or issues on finding locations for a teleconference meeting. Because there's not a strong urgency to get this done in the next, couple of weeks.
Move to defer to the August meeting.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to defer to the August meeting from Dr. Dresky with a second from Ms. Mitchell. Any discussion? Any comments from the board, from the public?
Members, I would presume that during the interim period, we'll provide written notice to Ms. Stephen.
Yes.
Like the
Hold on, Friday.
So we will defer this to August. In the interim, we will provide comments to the EO. So I'm going to call for the vote. Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Ms. Brandby? Ms. Garcia? Dr. Kawaguchi?
Aye.
Dr. McIntyre?
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell? Mr. Moradami? Ms. Salazar Sperber?
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky?
Aye.
Sperber, aye. Okay, so we defer this. All right, we're moving to agenda item 13. Discussion on the emerging technologies and the impact on consumers and the profession.
So, members, as you may recall from the last Sunset teleconference, there were some comments made that the board would like to have more time to fully discuss and have a robust discussion about the emerging technologies, online refractions, kiosks, and how the impact to consumers and impact to the profession. So we put this, all the information available to date in the memo to provide the opportunity for the board to have more discussions related to these topics. I started the memo out with an overall, the consumer protection concern that we have heard thus far, essentially that the consumers don't understand the difference between what a comprehensive eye exam is and what a refraction is in any setting, not just online refraction of kiosks, just that they think that if they do this one part of it, then they're getting a comprehensive eye exam. It was discussed during the Sunset hearing, and I provided a link to that portion of the video. Got a lot of feedback from the legislature. Senator Pan, who's also a doctor, and Senator Hernandez, who's an optometrist, provided good clarification of things that they're looking at, and their concerns essentially mirroring what our concerns were as well. They did throw around a few ideas to address the concerns, and I provided that in the memo of what they were looking at. This also was discussed. I'm sorry, do you want to add anything to the sunset portion of the hearing?
On the sunset, it was a good, healthy exchange. So they're aware of the issue, they're sensitive to the fact that the technologies are emerging, and they are looking for this board for guidance.
And during a hearing that I sat on a panel with the executive director of the medical board and the executive officer from the Board of Pharmacy as part of the hearing arts panel in front of the legislature. They were requesting us to just give them some information on the hearing was titled "The Regulation of Corporations and the Impact on Professional Licensing." And during that hearing, I was up there with Jenny and Kim, and the topic of online refractions and kiosks had come up, and potential solutions and the concerns that each board has. We relate those concerns, the same concerns that we have always talked about, but what was beneficial is that we were side by side with medical board as well. And she did testify that the medical board is taking a close look at this. They are looking at a case-by-case basis. They want to make sure that the same standard of care is followed in every case regardless of the setting. So it appears that we have the same message. We do have the same concerns. We're working together. We're up there saying how we are collaborating and sharing the information and to really look at the consumer protection concerns and the best way to address it. It's also a national level, as you guys may recall from the August meeting. It was discussed during the annual ARGO meeting there. During that meeting, one of the attorneys had provided a pretty good outline of the regulatory agency's roles in regulating the profession with all of the emerging technologies. So I provided that to the board members again. And then I provided some more information most recently with Delaware Board of Speech Language Pathologists, Audiologists, and Hearing Aid Dispensers. they were trying to address this as well, and one of the common things that people are bringing up to solve this is we're just going to create an in-person requirement for the examination. That's essentially what Delaware tried to do. They made the initial assessment to be an in-person requirement, and so the FTC reviewed it as part of the normal regulatory process, and they came back with some suggestions and concerns, and so I provided those concerns to the members. So right now I don't have any requests for specific actions, but if the board would like to discuss how to address it, all I ask is that you, when you have those discussions, take into account the FTC guidance that was provided in the letter.
And before I open it up, I'm going to ask that we be mindful on this and contain it to a fact-based discussion. Mark?
Thank you. So, in order for me to, I'm sorry I'm talking so much today, in order for me to kind of evaluate what this board should do, I need a little bit more information, and I'll lay out my thinking. So, on this topic, I hear online refraction is bad. It's bad. It's bad. Okay? But then the next question, well, why is it bad? Because it fails to meet the standard of care. Okay? What would be helpful for me is, this is what I envision. 2 columns. In-person refraction and online refraction. And a list of the standard of care, what is expected in standard of care for in-person refraction, just refraction. And then in the second column, an explanation as to why online refraction does not meet the same standard of care as in-person refraction. And then in column 3, what law requires that particular standard of care for that rule. So then that will help me distinguish the difference between in-person and online, why there's a difference.
Well, before we move forward, I do want to make one comment on something you stated, because I don't think we've said that online refractions are bad.
We haven't said that. I've heard that.
But the questions have been raised. Right. We need to focus on the standard of care.
Right.
Dr. Jackson.
I'll start jabbering here. So I've got handouts. We'll pass those around. Okay, so I have a couple of issues. That's whoever wants to take a look around. Okay, so first off, online refractions or kiosk refractions. As far as the 2 biggest insurance type plans, actually 3 in California, Medicare and Medi-Cal. Medicare does not pay for a refraction. It's conspicuously left out as a covered service unless somebody has just had cataract surgery. Otherwise, it's not covered. Medi-Cal pays a separate fee for a refraction versus a comprehensive vision analysis. So those are factored out. VSP pays separately for a refraction than for a comprehensive vision analysis. So the folks that are providing this service can actually say, look, this is not considered part of a comprehensive examination because the major insurance companies don't consider it part of a comprehensive. We as professionals might, the insurance companies might not. So I could see folks doing kiosk and online refractions having a point on that. I think our duty is to make sure that the consumers are fully aware of what they are and they are not getting. So if you go into one of the nice major malls, like there's one near where I live, and there's an optical place there, and you can walk in, and there's a nicely dressed young woman with a white coat who's standing in the corner behind a little screen, and she's got a little cell phone mounted device, and you can go in and have a refraction done there, and an ophthalmologist will sign that form. And, hey, I just had an eye exam. And every optometrist who's here will tell you about when they ask their patient, what was your last eye exam? Oh, I had it at the DMV 4 years ago. They think reading an eye chart is an eye exam. So these folks don't know what they're getting. And unless we as a consumer protection board tell them what they are and are not getting, I think we're falling down on the job. Since we are also the oversight board for these optical places where these kiosk type refractions are being done, I believe we have the ability to require some type of a consumer notice placed there. Also, these are not medical offices. I don't believe that little screen is part of a medical office, so it's not necessarily licensed under the Board of Medical Examiners, or the Medical Board of California, excuse me. It all falls under our responsibility to make sure consumers know what they're getting and what they're not getting. And I just feel that we have to take some action, and we have to take some action in a fairly expeditious fashion, because this stuff's expanding, and somebody's going to lose their sight from undiagnosed glaucoma or diabetic retinopathy or God knows what. And we've got to do something to make sure consumers are protected. So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. For some folks, it's going to be a beneficial thing. I mean, I'd much rather have a 22-year-old who's very nearsighted at least get a pair of glasses without an exam and be able to see the street than have that person driving around squinting because they didn't have time to go to their optometrist. I'm fine with that as long as that 22-year-old knows what he or she is getting themselves into, what they are and are not getting. That's it.
So I guess my thing, Mark, to answer your question, I don't think we're calling, like I said, online refraction good or bad. I think what it is the public's perception of what an eye exam is. And in your general consumer, if you were to say eye exam, did you get your glass, they would say getting a refraction is getting their eyes checked, and that is what they consider an eye exam. If you ask any of the professional members here, our definition of what getting an eye exam is, the refraction is part of it, but it's also a complete ocular health, the check of the health of your eye. And I think it's important for the board to somehow convey that information to the consumer that an eye exam isn't just the refraction. And this online refraction part is, I think, very confusing to the consumer. And we don't want anyone to look like because of that.
Yeah, it's all about consumer protection and then understanding what they're getting. I mean, we discussed about the children's vision and how vision screenings are not comprehensive either. I would think that this online refraction is still much better than a vision screening, but it seems like there's some sort of something that's connected there. All vision screeners are not good as the online refraction. So I think we do need to look at it, but yes, it is a federal thing. It's all over right now.
First, I'd like to thank staff for the detailed report, because there's some information that we didn't have in the past, so I appreciate that. I'm also appreciative of the fact that we're seeing that the California Med Board is having open discussions in partnership with Optometry Board, because it is going to be something that we're going to have to be coordinated on if there's unlicensed activity going on in the state of California. It may be that we're the ones that get the report or complaint, but it actually applies to the Med Board. The final piece I want to make sure of is that in the past we had talked a lot about ensuring that we have representation at ARVO. And again, the report reinforces the importance of us staying connected at a national level. So I just want to confirm, we are scheduled to have attendance at the next
Yes, so I will be attending that meeting in June, and every year we submit a budget change proposal request, an out-of-state travel request to go to those annual meetings. Last year we requested 2 members, the executive officer and the president, and I think that it was approved just for one person to attend, but I think it was because I could have improved them saying why we need 2 members versus just 1. So in the one that I just recently submitted to the department, I tried to clarify why the executive officer would need to go in addition to perhaps a professional member to attend. And the reason being is because during this 3-day session, there's a series of work groups that happen, and then there's full presentations that happen. But how it's set up is that you have all of the regulators, so you have the executive officers in a room with all of the states to talk about more sensitive topics of enforcement and things that are coming down the bend and how the best practices are running the board. But at the same time, you'll have the professional members who are usually the presidents of the board, who are there to get education of what a professional member and the board as a whole, what their role is in protecting the consumer. And so I think that both educational pieces are really imperative, because the thought of ARBO is that they can get the leaders of the board on the professional side to really help all of the board members understand what their role as a member is, whether they're a public member or a professional member. Since those happen at the same time as the workshops that I would be attending, we would need the two separate people. So we submitted that as well. So it's in the infancy stages of the approval process. So that's
So my additional feedback around the attendance is going to be that we don't take a passive role in the subject, obviously, because I think we're all in agreement that there needs to be probably some law and regulations at national level that need to occur. And if we just keep talking about the subject, but there's nobody the ability to initiate a bill at national level, we're just going to be talking about it state by state. And then we're going to see things like we see now, which is individual states trying to regulate and control it when we really are just going to be spinning our wheels and it's not getting anywhere. So I think that'll be an important part of our role, not just this coming year, but going forward too. But thank you for the board.
Thank you. So to piggyback on that, I would add though that your comment about not someone at the national level to take this up. The flip side of the coin is California still has the most licensed optometrists in the nation. So if our board decided to take that leadership role and put together some sort of framework around this, we become the leader for a national model for other states to follow. I'm just throwing that out there. You can take that on go. The other thing that strikes me is a little bit of what Ruby said is that we're still back to, and what Dr. Tretzky said, is educating consumers on the importance of a comprehensive eye exam, which is exactly what we're trying to do with the children's vision. It seems like the fundamental issue here is we need to just educate and do a PR campaign, which we've talked about, but I don't think we've ever really put any teeth into how do we reach people about what a comprehensive eye exam is, because I think that twofold helps. One, it helps us as we continue down the path of the children's vision bill, but then I also think it brings to your point about when you go to get a refraction, maybe you're getting your glasses prescription or contact lens prescription from your iPhone, but what are the things that you're missing? And I think in some of the national and some of the things I've seen at a national level, it's been on Good Morning America and Today's Show and all of that. Dr. Oz had a whole article about it in his magazine. They're focusing on the ease of getting a glasses prescription. There's no discussion about the health of the eye. And I think that's a role that we could fill as we decide when Glenn takes on the issue of taking on this role at the national level. I think I think there's much more to be talked about and strategically laying out how we get to the point we need to get to. And I think there's many avenues to go down. And I'm happy that it's finally gotten to an agenda that we can have this conversation, because I think it's just the beginning of where this will end up going.
And if I may just add to that, so for example, if they go get an online refraction, they skip the doctor completely, and then they go to an independent optician, where they say, for example, they come to me, I make them spectacles, they're still having vision problems. And I found that when they are prescription from a doctor, an ophthalmologist, I'll call them. Can you tell me? And the doctor will confirm they're still going to have problems because there are some medical problems going on. Those glasses are not going to work. I just had something like that this week. And the ophthalmologist said they're not going to work because of this medical condition with their vision. So then are they going to hold the optician accountable? Any other comments?
So I have 3 comments. Building on actually the very good comments by the rest of the board members. One issue is, can this board take leadership? And I watched some of the discussion at Sunset Evening where we had to say very honestly to the legislature, well, we can't necessarily go after the ones that are in business right now because they're run by ophthalmologists and not optometrists. That is not necessarily a barrier to us if we want to take leadership on this, because we can certainly provide or create rules and guidance for optometrists when it comes to a point where optometrists are doing this or connected to this. And those guidelines or those rules might be seen as a model for the med board if the med board doesn't act very quickly. You know, we may have bandwidth to write the first draft of those rules. Second, in terms of state versus national, I get that this is a national interjurisdictional problem, but as Rachel has mentioned, sometimes when the states all start doing something, the feds say, oh my gosh, we better do something, otherwise the states are going to create this patchwork and there needs to be uniformity. So that activity at the state and local level is impetus to the feds, and that might be one way of doing it. One possible regulatory avenue is to, I don't know if the rule exists now, but if someone advertises, if an optometrist advertises a refraction, that advertising must say that it's not an eye exam. Note that I don't mention whether it's online, in person, in the newspaper, just basically saying if you advertise just a refraction, you have to say it's not an eye exam. I think that's probably in our jurisdiction. And then I like David's idea of consumer warning. I think the legal question that we can cross the bridge when we get to it is whether or not this kind of notice, in order to avoid the FTC objection, whether the similar type notice has to go to, or the rule is applicable regardless of whether you're doing online or in person. So, for example, if Mark opens up an office next door, puts on a white lab coat, and says, Jiffy refraction. And you come in, I do this in person, and then I call up my local optometrist and say, here are the numbers, or whatever you do, give me the prescription, that I am also required to do this notice. Again, to avoid the objection by the FTC that says you cannot just target online folks. We're saying, hey, online or whatever, you do it in person, you do it in Jiffy refraction.
That's a good idea. This needs to be posted. But when we had a committee or a work group or a get together, whatever we had, we had discussed putting something like this in a black box format online for something that says for California residents or something like that. But if you go to Jiffy Optical next to Jiffy Refraction, this should be posted in Jiffy Optical in big, bold, sitting on the floor right there. That, you know, if Jiffy Refraction is part of Jiffy Optical, so it just needs to be right there so consumers know that when I see the nicely dressed young guy in his white coat, he ain't licensed to do anything. He's not an OD, an SLD, a CLD, an anything. He's just somebody who's getting paid $12.50 an hour to push a button.
That's true.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments?
Is there an opportunity for us to sit down with representation from the Med Board to have a session together?
For the full board, or would you just want representation? I can invite them to our next meeting. I would recommend having the Sacramento meeting.
Was there a committee that was created? These may change. There's only one on local clinics, but not on emerging technologies.
So, well, we had one that made the pamphlet up.
That was outreach.
Oh, that was outreach, okay.
That was outreach, okay.
Is it worth asking? Is it worth talking to the company that makes the app for the iPhone? I believe it's called Smart Vision Labs, and they do some amazing stuff. And this stuff is used in third world countries to do all types of diagnosing and telemedicine, and it's great technology. If there's a way to ask them if they have a presentation that they'd like to give to us as the board, and we can discuss our concerns with them. I mean, they're the ones that hold the patents, I believe, on this technology. It's not the folks online. This is the in-person stuff. But that's what's being used in most of the optical offices, jiffy refraction.
Any comments from the public on this matter? The item that came up the last time we had this discussion went to the Communication Outreach Committee. The committee is meeting May 4th. And the discussions that we've had today, this issue still focuses on awareness. We have some guidelines now, given the decisions that have been rendered. Let that committee, I'm going to suggest that committee look at many of the ideas that were discussed today, and then come back to the board with some recommendations.
Can I just make a suggestion to that committee to maybe look at more online educational outreach? Because I know we talked about Facebook and Twitter, and the people who are more inclined to use the online refraction will be the younger generation. And I think if we can do some kind of educational outreach to that particular subgroup, it would have more of an impact, I think, than, the pamphlet was great, but the younger generation is not going to sit there and read a pamphlet. Something that they can find, Google, or something online would be more beneficial. Thanks, Ray.
I saw on one of these commercial sites, online refraction sites, some little small disclaimer that says that they recommend a comprehensive eye examination every 2 years. It doesn't really help, but it's interesting, something where they're acknowledging that they're not getting a comprehensive eye examination.
And then some of the sites, they say, enter in your prescription, your most recent prescription, which should be within the last 2 years. I mean, they do have disclaimers that are sort of like limits and guidelines into what the prescription can be. And they do ask for your most updated prescription, but I mean, I could have had an eye exam 10 years ago and still said, yes, my most recent eye exam was 2 years ago. They don't have a way of checking that. So,
right. But just kind of exploring kind of the regulatory route. Do you want to impose is there an existing requirement that I cannot get a new pair of glasses if my prescription is
expired? And on average, most prescriptions go for 2 years if you're an adult, and 1 year period.
So if the spectacle dispenser, the contact lens dispenser, dispenses eyeglasses or contacts and the prescription is expired, then who goes after that? That person, that dispenser.
So we would.
Yeah,
Someone
the complaint has to be
file
filed.
a complaint, and then.
Okay, well, that's an enforcement, that's an enforcement issue. That's an like rulemaking issue.
Would go after
Clarification, these online prescriptions, they don't give a contact lens prescription, just a spectacle.
Okay.
No,
No.
the only contact lens
Lenses
prescriptions
as well.
also, yes.
That is, today, we don't have a formal complaint.
But it doesn't, I would wait till we get a formal complaint, because the first formal complaint could be, I can't see anymore, because I said.
No, I'm
you are-
not suggesting that we wait, I'm just adding to the conversation that happened today.
One comment I would just make is I think it's great to send it off to the committee and let them come back, but we've got to, I think, set some deadlines on when we're going to start making some decisions in terms of what we're going to do, because this is definitely their marketing. We already know all of this. It's national. And we continued. I feel like kicking the can. We just don't. We had a brochure. Lillian brought up the online stuff. We've talked about Instagram, Snapchat, but yet where's the strategic plan to make that happen? And I think we need to have some deadlines that we impose on ourselves, that we're going to come up with some decisions on how we're going to move forward on this.
And I think that this is part of the strategic plan, so that's a 4-year plan. So once the strategic plan is adopted, then the next step with Solid is to meet and set objectives with a full timeline. And then at every subsequent meeting, we would provide updates for each objective and to see where we are as far as the timeline and meeting that timeline. So I think the mechanisms are set in place to do just that for the board.
My question is I know what happens eventually if an optometrist, we talked about having an out-of-court settlement, and eventually it will make its way to the board if it's a high enough dollar value. Let's say somebody goes to Jiffy Refraction, they have severe diabetic changes. A year later, they end up losing their sight. 6 months later, they end up losing their sight. And they sue Jiffy Refraction and Jiffy Optical next door. They settle out of court for X amount of money. Is the board ever going to hear about that? Because we're not talking about somebody with an OD license or something that will be reported to the National Practitioner Database.
So, well, there are a few things because right now, as you know, there's no optometrist doing it, so that it wouldn't, the requirement to notify us of that settlement would never come into play yet because the optometrists aren't doing it. Medical board has similar reporting requirements, so the medical board would find out if the ophthalmologist was sued, and the RVO program itself doesn't have that same reporting requirement for malpractice. So unless an optometrist was involved, then we wouldn't find out.
That's my point. You said that we were talking about, if somebody files a complaint with the board, if it's something that, if it's relatively minor, they have poor depth perception and they smash up their car and it's $1,000 deductible and Jiffy Optical pays for it, we're never going to know about these things. In fact, there will be people without a doubt who will have sight-threatening conditions, lose their sight, have adverse events, and we're never going to hear about it unless we have something posted somewhere that says, here's what you're getting into, and if you have a problem, call Jessica and Cherie will come out and take your complaint.
But if since the RDO program is under us, if we did something that said this also needs to be reported to the RDO, then right? So now that we have RDO and optometry, if there's a significant settlement between the optician and the ophthalmologist of just Jiffy Optical, and then would you hear about it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we would have to do, that requires a legislative change.
But that's not
So-
work for them.
Correct, yeah, and so maybe that could be another thing to defer to the dispensing optician committee to look at, because you really want to make sure that all perspectives are represented and come up with that recommendation to the board for any legislative changes.
I don't know if I would say that optometrists are not doing this. We don't know that for sure. Our optometrists, the large part, are doing the right thing, but we have found through our closed sessions that we have subsets that march to their own drummer and do not take our laws. So I just want us to be open that they may look at this as a new quick business opportunity and venture, and we're right there. The future's here.
Right.
I think Dr. Turetsky's point is correct. Our observation is correct. Until people are aware, then they don't know, well, you know what, I had that refraction and now I found out I'm diabetic and I'm losing my eye. They don't know there are connections. So we do have a real sense of urgency on moving forward on this issue. And the package here shows how long we've talked about this issue, and it is time for us to come up with some parameters and next steps.
No one has said this is a really good warning. This is something that you can use or.
This will require, this proposed warning requires significant legal review and determine, because some of this.
It passed my review.
So there's that. So there's that.
Obviously, first draft starting point.
No, I don't, that isn't anything negative. I mean, there's a couple of different things. Number one, the content itself. Number two, how do we create a posting requirement? For example, there's several posting requirements in the medical office. Hey, medical doctors are regulated by the medical board. Hey, physician assistants are registered by the PA board. I'm not sure we could get the regulatorily, but it would be something to certainly consider statutorily. So that's the kind of thing about some time and applicability.
And that's why I'd really like to get moving on this, because by the time this could actually be rolled out, we're probably talking well over a year.
Perhaps.
I want to reiterate one point and repeat a point made by the legislature. One is, even though optometrists are not, as far as we know, doing this board has the power and the opportunity to occupy the space by setting forth rules for optometrists, because no one has rules. And if we establish rules for optometrists, the medical board will say, oh, optometry did this, we'll just change optometry to ophthalmologists and use the optometry board's guidance for rules.
Or they might not.
But if you bring them to the table, they'd be more likely to.
Second, all is not lost, and let me make a slight plug for my profession. And one of the legislators on the Sunset Committee, I think, mentioned this, and that is, if one of these practices or businesses fails to meet the standard of care, we may not know about it or go after them, but if there is an injury, the plaintiff's lawyers would be after them. So every doctor I know says, well, I'm going to do this or that, or I'm going to administer this test because I don't want to be sued. And so that same deterrent is there for I think these practices.
We just don't want to get to the point where someone is having to seek legal counsel. I feel better with this discussion than I have in the past because we have some really action items that we can follow up. One session with the Med Board, looking at that. And giving presentations.
And I agree with Rachel. I think we do need to sort of give ourselves a deadline, like a hard deadline. So, we have been talking about this. This has been an issue for the last year, and we've made some small steps, but I think as a board and as a leader, like I said, we're the most optometrists in the United States. We need to sort of set a hard deadline with, by this date, we are going to have some, definite suggestions or different ways to reach the younger consumers, our consumer warning, but I think we do need to set a hard deadline.
I think waiting for the strategic plan and solid's too long. I think that putting the power into, I think I would like to say, let's get a recommendation from your meeting May 4th, so that's next week.
Right.
So can they send out an email of what they come up with in recommendations so that we can have some solid deliverables at the August board meeting? Like, this is what we're going to do next. Whether it's we start and who on the board wants to take on the social media aspect, and who wants to take on the consumer warning, and who wants to, and I think the next meeting we all have to be prepared to what role are we individually going to take to make this a reality.
Who's on the public outreach?
And Dr. Preston.
Our national.
Based on what you're saying, I also think that this should be a topic of discussion at the lead registry meeting.
And share the love.
To clarify, the members of the Public Relations Outreach Committee, with Dr. Kawaguchi, Donna Burke, and Ruby Garcia, we also had requested that Dr. Turetsky and Dr. Tala had requested Dr. Turetsky also help with the conversations. So he's not an appointed member, but he's helping with this specific topic.
So, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I move
that we direct the Public Outreach Committee to come back to the board with a full communications plan.
prior.
And prior to that, we communicate to the board with the committee.
That's it.
That's the motion?
I second.
Okay, a motion and a second from you. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public? Okay, to the vote. Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Ms. Brand?
Aye.
Ms. Garcia?
Aye.
Dr. Kawaguchi? Dr. McIntyre?
Aye.
Ms. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mr. Moradani? Ms. Salazar-Sperber?
Aye.
Dr. Turetsky? Burke, aye. Okay. We are on to Election of officers, agenda item number 15.
Sheree, would you mind moving to agenda item 15, please? So members, in my cover memo, I explained the available positions for the board. We did submit a request for nominations. We received one from Ms. Donna Burke. She is nominating Dr. Wong for vice president. But at this time, members, anyone can nominate anyone to any of the positions and provide that candidate time to add any statements to whether or not they accept the position and why they feel they're a good candidate for the position. So,
I'm going to nominate someone.
Oh, okay, well, then with that. Thank you.
Take it away.
Okay. So for the position of president of this board, I'd like to nominate Sid Brandwein for the position. I've known Sid during my tenure with this board, and she's proven to be a leader. The thing I'm most impressed with is I think she served on almost every committee that we've created to support this board, the selection committee, and whether we'll have to refresh our recollections of all the committees that you've served on. So she's really put her time in supporting this board. This coming year, we face a number of challenges that will require some adept leadership, some political leadership. We just finished one of those topics. The other large topic, or actually it's probably a mountain that we have to climb, is with the children's vision, where we are arrayed against Kaiser Permanente, the school nurses, the ophthalmologists, and others. So it would require some strong political leadership. Now, as is obvious to everyone, she's not an optometrist. But she, in her work on the, well, maybe she's an optometrist today. We refer to a doctor as a doctor, but through her work in various committees, she's worked very collaboratively with the professionals. And in board meeting, she has worked with the optometrists very cooperatively. As you might have noticed, she is, particularly in this board meeting, we've had some very contentious topics. I've been spouting off on every agenda item. She's been listening very quietly, thinking, listening to everyone, and then kind of grasping all that and then stating her well-reasoned opinion. So I think she'd be a great president of this board. And last, I didn't vote in favor of her last time. So this is coming from a point of great respect. So that's my nomination.
Before we go further, Ms. Brandwein, if nominated, you would serve in that position?
Yes, I said thank you.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So before we entertain any statements from Ms. Brandwein or questions, if there's any other nominations for president at this time?
I'd like to nominate Dawn Burke. I think she has done an amazing job as vice president. Today she's done a fantastic job acting as president and leading the meeting, and I think she'd be a fantastic president. And she served on, I don't know how many meetings. Thank you.
And the same question goes to you, Ms.
Yes,
Burke.
I've said before, I will serve where I am needed. If needed.
With that, are there any other nominations for board president? Okay, so then with this, members, we are doing similar to what we did last time with 2 possible candidates, and we will go down the list, and if you could tell me the person that you are voting for. I'm so sorry. Before we go, open it up to Ms. Brandwein, if you wanted to make any statements to the board at this time.
Sure. Thank you for your confidence. I appreciate it. And the resuscitation of my many different value adds to the board by serving on committees. My leadership style will be different than the leadership style we've seen in the recent past as well as currently with respect to really looking at this as we have a very limited time together. And I'm not just speaking of the terms that we each have, but the time that we are physically in meetings and able to speak to one another to talk about some pretty important subject matters that impact the safety and protection of the consumers in California. And the expertise that I bring in policy, risk management, and the like can help us navigate some of those stickier topics in order to develop a path forward and to finally bring some resolution to these areas and not just continue the conversation. We all have diverse expertise, and maximizing that by having everyone speak up as to which committee they would like to serve on and what they would like to personally contribute will be very important, and that would be something I would tackle as the first agenda item of the first meeting. The full committee structure, what makes sense, where we might need 5 members, where we may need to move to a work group again, such as Children's Vision, and truly set the priorities and agenda based on what we all collectively decide, with me hearing from all of you and literally voting on the future agenda items as we've spoken about doing in the past, but we've never done the vote, and that will help prioritize and develop the agenda, at which time I would not deviate from the agenda unless there was something legislatively or that came through the governor's office or the legislature that required a shift in whatever that next agenda list would be. And the agenda, quite frankly, would not come out 10 days prior to the meeting. It would be out much further in advance to give us much more time to think about what's coming up. Materials may not all be distributed on time. And then lastly, based on this committee structure, having a standard cadence of a president's message during those off months so we know what exactly happened in these committees. I'd ask that each committee get together immediately after establishment, determine who is going to lead that committee, and then that person, I will not serve on any committee, which is a little different too. I would not serve, I would ask that the leader of that committee send a short 3 to 5 bullet, what was tackled, what was achieved, and what were our next steps to come in, and that would be a part of the president's message, or whatever we want to call the Department of Optometry corner on our site, so people are consistently seeing that we're working not just during these meetings, but truly year-round. Thank you.
So with that, Donna, would you like to make any opening statements?
Sure. This is my second term with this board. And I volunteered because I saw an opportunity to give voice to the public. I'm not a professional. I had no idea all of the different, the terminology, the industry, nothing. I just knew I went to the eye doctor, I had my eyes checked. I've learned a lot. I've had an opportunity to pass that learning on to other members of the public. I believe that in the time that I've served, the people who joined this board have done so for the same reason. They're not here to get their name listed as an officer. They truly want to represent what's in the best interest of the public. And we try to do that in a manner that's collaborative. We all have very diverse personalities. We all have different interests, job demands, children, what have you. But when we're focused on this, the public is what matters. So I can only assure you that I would work in a manner that would continue the collaboration, that would allow you to have a voice, and to continue to work with staff and give you the many, many kudos that you so richly deserve for the work that you do, and have respect for your workload, and try and do it in a manner that helps us achieve our goals and objectives in a timely manner without causing undue stress.
Okay, so at this time, members, I'd like to open it up to board members to ask any additional questions or maybe any statements for each of the candidates. So we can just go down the row. For Dr. Wong.
Doctor.
We voting or?
No, we're not voting, just any, no, I have one comment, sorry. Okay. We're gonna go to Ruby Garcia.
So I just, I know, speaking with board members, I do like it with all the changes that are going to be going through with the operations. I do like the direction that it is taking. I also appreciate very much Don Burke's support as well. Just want to make the comment for both, and then I'll make my vote.
Dr. Kawaguchi.
No problem.
Dr. McIntyre.
Nothing at this time.
Ms. Michelin.
I think both of these women are incredibly qualified to serve as chair of the board, and I appreciate both willingness to step up. I think they both bring that perspective that's needed. I do want to ask, I think we've had some issues in terms of, I would say some ethical decisions that have been made in the past by some folks in leadership positions on this board. And I just want to know what assurance, because I go back to we're in this together. And if one of us does something that violates a law or violates something, it's reflective on all of us. And I know I'm very cognizant of my professional reputation, as I know everyone else is on this board. And I just want to know too that when as chair of the board, when you see something or a board member doing something that is not in the spirit of full disclosure or public accessibility or whatever, are you or have you stood up to raise that to make sure that we collectively are protected as a full board?
And I'll tackle that. And yes, I've spoken up all year. I lead by example, and more importantly, I have to be held to a higher standard. And that I take this extremely seriously. The ethics and compliance training that I've taken this year alone is not just through the state and my company, but also through the student teaching that I do at Arizona State University and in other entities. It's always on my mind, constantly, and making sure that all of us are protected by going to the right sources and resources, such as legal sources, to clarify when something may look like a conflict of interest or a violation. It's not just me, it's about all of us, and keeping us all, and it'll impact our professions too, and how you are perceived by not only your colleagues, but in general. I can't say enough about that part.
I worked in an environment where that was expected. That was our code of conduct. Yes, I have done that. When I see something or observe something, I go to the individual first and have the conversation. And then, if warranted, I contacted legal, I contacted other resources. But I think before jumping to conclusions and assuming that something was done wrong, I've had a direct conversation with the individual.
Especially, do you have any other questions or comments? Mr. Mordomi?
I just want to thank both candidates for stepping up to the plate. Being present is hard work, and there's going to be really hard work, and I appreciate you guys being willing to make the sacrifice. It's very honoring.
Ms. Berman?
I actually feel a little conflicted because it's a good problem to have. I think, like Rachel pointed out, both candidates are so qualified for the position and have a lot of experience and richness, and it sounds like they both adhere to an ethical standard, which I think is very one of the more important qualities of a leader of a board. So I'm really happy to see both Donna and Sid stepping out. It's a good problem to have.
But I have no one.
Dr. Tereski?
Well, I nominated Donna 2 years ago. I nominated Sid last year. Chances are pretty good you're both going to lose. So, I mean, that shows my confidence in both of them. I don't know which way to go right now. So.
Well, we're gonna find out. So let's go take, schedule a vote. So members we're gonna ask public comment. Okay, so before going to a vote, members, I'm gonna read off your name, and if you could tell me who are you nominating for president. I'm sorry, who are you voting for president? Thank you. Ms. Burke.
Burke.
Dr. Wong.
I'll do my vote again for the second time, Dr. Burke.
Sid Brandine.
Myself, thank you.
Ms. Garcia.
Sid.
Dr. Kawaguchi.
Ms. Brandon.
Dr. McIntyre.
Sid Brandon.
Ms. Michelin.
Sid Brandon.
Mr. Maradoni.
Sid Brandon.
Ms. Berger.
Absolutely. Donna. Ms. Burke.
Dr. Tresky.
Did a quarter one? I'll Sid.
All right, let's 7 votes Sid. Congratulations on Sid being nominated and appointed our next board president. All right, members, we are moving to the vice president position, and we have one nomination for Dr. Wong for vice president. So this time, Dr. Wong, do you accept that nomination? Yes. Okay, at this time, are there any other nominations for vice president?
I'd like to nominate David Turetsky.
Dr. Tresky, would you accept that nomination?
Yes. I usually decline this. Yes.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for vice president? All right, at this time, we'll open it up to Dr. Wong if you'd like to make some opening statements.
I think I've been on the board for the last 2 years, and we have undergone significant issues with SB 684, with children's vision, with sunset. So, and it's been a very educational experience, and it's been an honor to serve. We still have many more issues that are upcoming, and I just look forward to being a part of the process.
Dr. Turetsky.
Actually, I went following Mark and his eloquent. I didn't know I couldn't make a statement, so I'd like to just share why I wanted to nominate Dr. Turetsky. I've had the opportunity to work with him now since I've been appointed, which has been a couple of years. What I truly appreciate and have appreciated is his thought process. I appreciate being able to talk to him, getting his perspective on things. We don't always agree, but he helps me look at things, especially as a public member, from a different perspective, which I think has helped me make better decisions as a board member. I appreciate how he always steps up at board meetings. I mean, just what we just did, bringing his consumer warning and really being on the forefront of how do we protect the consumers and how do we look down the pipeline to make sure that we're addressing some of these really important issues. I have truly appreciated his involvement even on children's vision. He has been constantly I get emails from people around the state saying, I ran into Dr. Tretsky, told me to talk to you about children's vision, and really out there promoting all the good work that we're doing, which I think is vitally important if you're serving on as a leadership position on this board. And so I just really think that with his experience, his long tenure on this board, that he would be a great complement to having our first public member who was just elected as chair of this board. I think it's a nice complement to each other, and so that's why I feel strongly about supporting him as the vice chair.
So,
I've been nominated for things before and I've declined at all times because I really feel that this should be a public board, and I'd like to have public members as the board officers. However, with some of the stuff that's coming up, mobile vision as well as children's vision, especially mobile vision, I got a lot of experience in that. My group worked with the board and with the state when the laws were changed for nursing home examinations, and I think I can offer a keen perspective on the risks and benefits of mobile vision. I really wasn't expecting to do this. So, and somebody has to keep sitting check. So I definitely like to accept this, and I think I could do an excellent job in representing this board and protecting the public interest. So, I think that's it. It's difficult when I don't have much to say.
okay, so at this time, I'm going to open it up to questions from you or statements from you in support of each candidate. So, Ms. Burke.
No questions.
Ms. Brandwein.
No question.
Ms. Garcia.
No question, but I think they're all very great people.
Dr. Kawaguchi. Dr. McIntyre.
No questions, but as I told Dr. Turetsky earlier, that maybe I told someone else, sometimes I just don't speak that much because I'm formulating thoughts in my head, and then Dr. Turetsky says them before I have a chance to. So I sit here in silence because he says all of the things that are going on in my
I've
head.
been married 35 years.
For the right
So
one? That was my insight to that.
But thank you. I appreciate the thought processes you go through, and it seems to be on my wavelength. Thank you. No question.
Ms. Michelin, would you like to add to your statement or ask any questions?
No.
Mr. Mardomi?
David, how many years have you been on this board?
I was appointed December 2013.
Ms. Berger?
No questions.
All right, open up to public comment. Okay, members, same routine. I'm going to call your name if you can let me know who you are voting for the position of Vice President. Ms. Burke?
Dr. Long.
Dr. Wong? Ms. Brandwein?
Dr. Turetsky.
Ms. Garcia?
Dr. Turetsky.
Dr. Kawaguchi?
Dr. Turetsky.
Dr. McIntyre?
Dr. Turetsky.
Ms. Michelin?
Dr. Turetsky.
Mr. Mardomi?
David Turetsky.
Ms. Berger?
Dr. Wong.
And Dr. Turetsky.
Yep, me.
Okay, with 7 votes for Dr. Turetsky, congratulations on being appointed as Vice President.
It'll be huge.
At this time, members, we open it up to one more position. We have a vacancy for the position of secretary. We have no current nominations, so I open it up to nominations.
I'd like to nominate Rachel Michelin. Her attention to detail on the minutes is unlike anything I've seen in any committee, any group, any company, event, meeting, session, it's an extreme, it's a gift, the attention to detail. And it would really help all of us as we're navigating all of these issues and keeping track of the information flow. Therefore, and she's been a real strong partner. I worked with her in the past in the capacity of vice president. It's a very strong partnership.
Ms. Michelin, do you accept the nomination?
Sure. Thank you.
Are there any additional nominations for secretary?
I know. I'd like to nominate myself.
So, last name.
Ms. Gerber, do you accept the nomination?
Sure.
All right. Well, then, at this time, I will go ahead and open it up to Ms. Michelin if you'd like to make any opening statements.
I served in the capacity of secretary 2 years ago. And, one of my, I take it very seriously. I think the minutes are a reflection of what we do. And I think that is, when you talk about consumer protection, that's the first thing. Because I know when I look at a board meeting, even other boards, I directly go to the minutes to see what they've discussed. I take it, I do, even when I was at it before, I also took a responsibility that I turned the minutes around pretty quickly, because I realized that staff has to incorporate that into the packet. So I made sure that I made the time to go over them, to ask questions, to get that. Even now, though, I still, Jessica knows, email, separately. I don't recall this happening at the meeting. Can we go back to the tape? Can we look at the teleconference? Because I think it is just a very, very important aspect. As someone who runs an organization where our minutes are publicly out there, I take it as a responsibility to reflect all of you, to make sure that role is being done. And so, it's something I enjoy doing. I enjoy reading the minutes and making sure they're correct, because I think it is also protecting us as a board and making sure that they're accurate.
All right, Ms. Gerber.
For me, it's really an opportunity to be more involved in the board. I'm obviously a new appointee. I've been on the board for just over a year, which really enjoyed being on the board. I've learned a lot so far, and so for me, it was really an opportunity to be involved. Since there's a lot of issues that are coming forward, it's just an opportunity to be involved in both clinics and get to know the board better. So.
All right, and members, I'd like to open it up to you to ask any questions or to make statements in support of one of the candidates. So with that, I'll go down the roll again. Ms. Burke.
No question.
Dr. Wong.
No questions.
Ms. Brandwein.
No question.
Ms. Garcia.
No questions, but just compliment both of them are great and very inspirational. Rachel has just been conversation and had some inspiration. Things you said.
Dr. Kawaguchi.
No questions.
Dr. McIntyre.
No questions.
Mr. Muradomi.
No questions.
Dr. Turetsky.
No questions.
This time, I've opened up the public comment. Okay, members, I will go down the roll, and to determine the next secretary, please vote for who you're voting for. Ms. Burke.
Maria.
Dr. Wong.
Ms. Gerber.
Ms. Brandwein.
Rachel Michelin.
Ms. Garcia.
Oh, Rachel.
Dr. Kawaguchi.
Michelin.
Dr. McIntyre.
Rachel.
Ms. Michelin.
Rachel.
Mr. Muradomi.
Ms. Michelin.
Ms. Berger.
Me.
Dr. Turetsky.
Ms. Michelin.
All right, Ms. Michelin, congratulations on being appointed secretary.
Next agenda item, future agenda items.
So, closed session.
Right.
we can open up the questions on the future agenda.
Yeah, would you like to? No, okay, so I'll open it up to items that the members would like to have added onto future agenda items. That's our current list, and we're happy to add more.
Okay, I'm curious about the control over scope of practice. Was that just for the optometrist, or would that also, I'd really like an agenda item for opticians as well?
I believe at the time that it was added, that was by a professional member referring specifically to the scope of practice for optometrists, but what we can do is expand that to both.
That would be great. And then the other one where staff outreach is the events. I know at some point I belong to the California City Society for Opticians, and we are going to have an event next year at the Knott's Berry Farm Hotel. I was very successful this year. We want to include optometrists there, and I don't know if this board would be willing to have one of the board meetings on the Friday before, and then continuing on with some continuing educations for both optometrists and for opticians would probably be a good opportunity to interact with the public there. So. We're heading on right. You want after it would be on the Saturday would be the classes. And we're looking at, we're flexible. Right now, we tentatively have it for March 17th. But if you feel that a meeting is more appropriate for April, I'd like to know ahead of time and we can reserve that date, either or. So I need to know if you are open for it. It was a really good outcome this year. And a lot of optometrists are very happy that we're working on including them. And we're going to do it surprisingly at a very good price. So hopefully, I just want to include them.
So I stopped by, I happened to be down visiting my parents, so I stopped by Ruby's event. It was fabulous. And what I stopped in for lunch and sat at a tables with some of the young opticians that are still going through school, they were just fast. They could not believe that members of the optometry board would show up. And just to have a conversation, just to introduce, to show that you care and that it's important, went a long way. And I think by having a board meeting there the day before would just send just an incredible signal to that we're all together. We're all married. We're all married.
God, that makes me so happy.
So I would wholeheartedly support something like that.
A couple things. So whenever we get a room like this one, or we get a hotel, that's when you got to be a contract. We have to execute a contract, so you can direct the executive officer to see if that location will execute a contract with us. I don't know whether they will or not. So we can go from there as you go through room searches and stuff like that.
I'm just supporting her idea. Yeah.
Can I get clarification on the requested item to be added to an agenda? Because it sounds like to me that you're just requesting that we have a future board meeting at the location, not necessarily as an added agenda item. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so with that, I don't think we can go too much further into this discussion because it's off of but it is something that staff can consider to have a future meeting. And also those board meetings are set by the board, and so that's what we'd be looking at those dates.
So this is kind of procedural, but so this agenda item is future agenda items, and the text of the memo says the board may discuss and decide whether to place a matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Okay, so that's the scope of our power in this agenda item. Item number 2 is board prioritization of future agenda items. I think we can, right now, under how this agenda is noticed, we can do that prioritization right now if we want to. I don't think we need to, I think it's kind of ridiculous to have to put on a future agenda an item about what we're going to put on future agendas. So I just point that out as my semi-legal opinion, but certainly my policy opinion.
I think the concept was to vote on future agenda items so that when the chair was putting the agenda together, they knew what the will of the board was in terms of priority.
So I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with you. No, I'm all for that. That's what I wanted to do at the last board meeting, and it didn't happen. I'm all with you. I think we go through each item and vote on it. You know, what's the priority? What does the board want to see?
Maybe just have a meeting up on Cupid's.
Can I suggest one more item for future agenda items? We had talked about maybe putting together a work group or a committee to work with or to communicate with the NBEO, since our last conversation with them was not particularly satisfying. So if we could maybe think about putting that on the agenda.
And actually, at that board meeting, there was a motion to create that, and I think Dr. Wong, that you were part of that, who was appointed to that committee. So I don't think I think that it would be just an update from that body to do that work and bring that to the board.
That's in the minutes, so it was already created.
Oh, as a fault, last comment I forgot to also add. I think it's my opinion that the board president and working with the executive officer have the power themselves to say this is what's going to happen at the next meeting. So that's an option too. This is also a welcome opportunity for the board to have input.
And it's also in the board member handbook and how items are added to the agenda. And when you prioritize numbers, that would be helpful, but also keep in mind that depending on where the meeting is, that could also help drive what items we're going to be heard. Because, for example, if we want a presentation from DCA and for the OE tracker, for example, and what Breeze can do, there's significant people in Sacramento that would need to be present for that discussion, and so that would be pushed off to a January meeting.
That's fine.
So there's other things to consider, and so while some of these have been sitting there, we have to prioritize based on the resources and locations of the meeting.
That's fine.
I have a follow-up to what Dr. Longham talked about with NBEO. As an add to that, I'd like to at least hear in person from a representative from NBEO once a year. So I think that's something that we should ask of them, and so that we can have a known date when they're going to be attending, or sending a representative.
We invited them several times, and they had various excuses as to why they couldn't come or conflicted with their schedules. I think that's a great idea.
So then this will definitely escalate as a topic of discussion if we're not getting support or communication.
Sure. Since as a kind of quasi-legislative body, we can invite them, but if they refuse us year after year after year, we can disappear.
Looking for friendly relations.
If we have some investigation, then yes.
But we don't have legislative subpoena power.
No, this board doesn't. We have investigative subpoena power after a complaint is filed and get investigation launched. We have some subpoena power that extends to non-compliance with our coming to the meeting.
How come we got there?
What other future agenda items? I just want clarification. What did the staff outreach at CE events mean? Was that staff or?
Yeah, so that was proposed, I believe, by Dr. Tresky, so he can jump in a moment. But I think it was more for staff to be present in CE events. The Monterey Symposium has staff out there to provide outreach, and throughout the state, the staff would go. So if you would like to do it similar to the scope of practice for the comptroller scope of practice to broaden it, yes, we can do that as well. So when we discuss it, that's part of this.
So if it turns out in our discussions with the medical board that there is substantial information that they may be able to share with us that would help us in our movement related to telehealth or telemedicine, that we would ask them to attend. If there's not, it's fine. But I just want to make sure that we have that as potential.
What other future agenda items?
So to clarify, members, the only one that we're actually adding is the update from the committee's going to work with the NPEO on the examination concerns. And there was also the request to broaden a few. What I would suggest is that in everything that the board staff presents, to look at it in how it impacts all licensees and registrants under the board, so we don't have to keep going back and saying, oh, we want this just for optometrists or just for the dispensers. So I would think that would be an overall recommendation, that is, if any time both professions are impacted, we would include both of the professions.
Executive officers, we have two additional inputs for an upcoming meeting in August would be whatever came out of the emerging technology referral to the consumer.
Yeah, that was added from during the meeting.
As well as the Full Employment Act for me on what statutes are going to be rendered obsolete, may need to be revised as well. So I think those were two direct adds.
Thank you.
We take stuff off? We eliminate things? Like, for instance, I think we can eliminate the board prioritization on future agenda items.
Okay.
I think we have the online infractions outreach campaign, which is already being taken care of by the Public Relations Committee, so they're gonna report back. So does that need to be, it'll already be on the agenda?
But it's still a future agenda item, so until the board actually is done with that item, I think it should be continue to be listed, so the board is aware of all of the issues that we are going to discuss at future items. So while it's in the process, it's going to continue to be a future agenda item.
All right, and I guess just the future agenda items, one.
Members, I'm not a board member, but I play one on TV. I believe the third bullet from the bottom, I believe the board has completed that task within its discussion of agenda item number 8 today.
I respectfully disagree with you, sir.
Yeah, the call and double.
Yeah, so there was.
We're halfway there, I'm sorry, I rounded up, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that was the request for staff to do some research similar to what Metaphor does and provide input.
I stand corrected, thank you.
Sid or Jessica, as some of these kind of start coming on the horizon for a board meeting, is there a way you can let us know so that we know that it's, for example, the branch office license matter, I would be interested in knowing that it's going to be on a board agenda more than 10 days in advance, in case I would like to ask some questions or say, hey, I want this information to this back report. So I don't know what mechanism you use, but I think other board members would be interested in that.
Can't we get legally, can you do a draft agenda to board members?
You sure can, but the problem is that any comments would have to be directed back to the executive officer. The board cannot determine what's on the agenda. That's kind of the purpose of this. So if the board wanted to say, listen, it's the top 4, we went on August for sure, we can do that. But to get sort of the consensus of the agenda violates OMA, because you have discussion.
Well, we're not getting at his point, saying we could get a draft agenda prior to 10 days before it's publicly,
Right, my only concern is I didn't want to back push it out. Okay, take that, we all agree to take that off, because then you've got discussion going on outside of board.
The other way of doing that, other agencies do, is they have kind of a agenda, I'm not choosing the right term, but agenda calendar. So if perhaps the chair and Jessica and whoever else needs to be involved decide or realize that I'm going to just put one staff outreach at CE, needs to be in Sacramento because it needs input from the medical board, then you can put on next month's agenda August or whatever, anticipated August, whatever in Sacramento. So that we know, okay, that's the expected or anticipated, or we're not going to hold you to it, but it just gives us kind of a planning.
So using the minutes of this meeting, getting them compiled, and out, can we do a draft set of minutes to go out, or we'll just use the draft minutes too to help cull out what we said we would discuss at the next board meeting? That becomes a part of the agenda, picked up by these things, and then we'll determine priority. And get input from all the board members in whatever manner is legal and correct. Thank you.
That it for future agenda items? Any comments from the public? Okay, we're moving into closed session.